You may continue your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, I believe you indicated that on July 31st, 1989, you were in Tampa, Florida,
Yes, I believe so.
and was that at the Harry Hopman Saddlebrook International Tennis Club?
I believe that was the name, yes.
Okay, and you were attending some kind of a school there?
I went there to play tennis, to train for Kalamazoo and to visit my Aunt Martha.
And when you were there, do you recall during that period of time that your brother was also there?
He may have been there that time, may have been the time before. I really don't have a great recollection, but it could have been that time.
Now, would you describe for the juries what the setup was like at this camp? Did you have your own room?
Yes. Every you shared rooms. You had roommates, and then there was the professional tennis side where a lot of the professional tennis players played, and then there was the camp side where a lot of the juveniles played, and I played on both sides.
Do you remember staying in Complex 4?
I don't remember
The arrangements were set up that you would have roommates?
Yeah, the first time I went there, I had 2 roommates or 1 roommate. I don't remember how many roommates. And then whatever time Lyle was there, I don't remember. Lyle and I stayed by ourselves, and there was a kid named Toby that used to hang out with us.
Okay. So you would stay in the same room as your brother?
Yes, well, there were separate rooms, but the same apartment.
Did each room have its own television set?
I have no idea.
Do you remember watching television while you were there?
No, I don't. I remember watching TV on a video camera that we had over there. We would tape tennis and watch it, and so on.
So there was a television set
Yes.
available. You don't recall whether it was in your individual room?
I don't know.
Was there a television set for the complex? That is some kind of a room that was shared by all of the people that had rooms within that complex?
There was a television set, I believe, in every apartment. It was a country club, and I guess the name was Harry Hopman's, rented part of it, and they rented these individual apartments, and I guess every apartment had a television set. I don't know if, I guess you're talking about a day room. I don't remember.
Do you recall the room number that you stayed in?
No, I have no idea.
There, I have a 2-page document from the Harry Hopman Saddlebrook International Tennis Club. I'm giving copies to each counsel. May I have that marked exhibit next in order?
277.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit 277. I should take a look at the 2 pages of that document.
The 2 pages, I'm sorry. Okay.
Mr. Menendez, does that refresh your recollection as to whether you and your brother were at that camp on July 31st, 1989?
No.
It does not.
No, I don't quite understand what it is. If you could just explain it to me. I mean, it
But
could,
Your Honor, I would object to having it explained.
Well, counsel, at this point, your client asked a question, and it's up to the prosecutor to ask another question.
Mr. Menendez, asking you to take a look at page 2 of exhibit 277. Does that indicate your name on that?
Judge, the document speaks for itself.
Overall.
oh, yes, okay. That's
Do
right.
you understand that part of it?
Yeah, I didn't know you were referring to the name up there. Yes, then it does.
Okay. And with respect to taking a look at this document then, and taking a look at the dates thereon, does that refresh your recollection as to where you were on July 31st, 1989?
Yes, on July 31st, I suppose it's not accurate. I wasn't there August 4th.
Okay, I'm asking you.
But on July 31st, yes, it does.
Okay. Now, as to the first page, sir, does that refresh your recollection as to whether your brother was there on that date as well?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and was he there also?
Yes, he was.
And furthermore, sir, with respect to the complex where you and your brother were staying, does that refresh your recollection as to which complex that would have been?
Complex 4.
Same complex.
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, with respect to the date of August 18th, 1989, you had indicated that you had a meeting set up with Dr. Oziel on that day,
Yes, I did.
and you indicated that you had canceled that appointment.
Yes, I did.
Do you recall when it was that you canceled it, and did you cancel it personally?
I don't, I'm not sure if I canceled it personally. I believe it was after Tuesday that I canceled it.
And was it the policy that, as you understood it, that if you canceled on what they called short notice, that you would be billed for the session?
Dr. Oziel usually billed me for whenever I had a session and whenever I canceled it, whether it was short notice or not.
Did you actually talk to Dr. Oziel's secretary when you would make an appointment or cancel an appointment?
I believe so. His secretary's name was Sandy, and I believe that I spoke with her personally. I don't know if I did on that date, but that's how it would go about.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor, with the Exhibit 97?
Yes.
Menendez, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 97. It's part of the package. It's 97A, B, C, and D. Okay, are you familiar with these?
Not completely, but if you could just show me where to look.
With respect to 97A, that would reflect the 1988 visits, is that correct?
Yes.
And with respect to 97B, do you see the entry for August 18th?
Yes.
And does that indicate that you canceled the session on short notice?
Yes, it does.
Did you cancel that session on that day, that is the 18th of August?
I don't remember. It was between Tuesday and Friday that I canceled it after I spoke with my brother.
Was it the day that you actually went to San Diego? That you
No,
canceled?
it wouldn't have been the same day. It may have been Thursday, if that's what short notice means. I really don't know.
Now, you felt that you wanted to talk to Dr. Oziel about something on the 18th?
Yeah, well, not on the 18th. I felt I wanted to talk to him on, I think it was Monday, the 14th, that I made the appointment with him. Sometime between Sunday and Tuesday, I made the appointment with him because I wanted to talk to him about this problem.
You had a good relationship with Dr. Oziel and you wanted him to help you out?
Objection.
Overall,
No, that's not the reason. I don't know what kind of a relationship I had with Dr. Oziel. What my dad told me on Sunday was such a hard thing for me to be able to handle. I just felt really terrible, and he was the only one I saw to talk to.
Now, this question, I've been requested by the Beverly Hills Police Department to just specify.
Objection, Your Honor, to the introduction.
okay, why don't you just ask a question?
I know we've gone over, sir, about the Mulholland Drive where you deposited the shotguns.
Yes.
When you were heading on Mulholland, which direction were you going?
I went up Cold War.
352, it's a discovery.
Jack, you're adjourning the objection.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I went up Coldwater, and we made a left.
Left on Mulholland?
Yes.
Now, when you got out of the car, did you go down a hill, which would have been on the passenger side, or did you cross the street to the other side?
No, the hill would have been on the passenger side. So if you're going down Mulholland, the hill went down toward the valley side. That's where the hill went down.
And you had indicated that there were big trees in that area?
Yeah, I just remember all sorts of forest all around on both sides of the road.
And on the other side of the road, did the hill go up, or did it also go downhill toward the LA side?
I don't remember it going up, but I can't be positive about that.
Now, Mr. Menendez, you had indicated that your mother throughout your life would help you with your schoolwork,
Yes, you would.
and she would help you to fill out applications.
She did my applications.
Okay. Asking you to take a look at the photograph on the board, Exhibit 7. Do you see the paperwork, the letters that are near your mother on the floor?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things there.
When you turn on the lights after shooting your parents and wanting to go back to pick up the shells, did you notice what those letters were?
I didn't look.
At some time later, did you, when you came back and your brother called 911, did you actually went in to see your parents again, didn't you?
Yes.
And at that point, did you see what your mother had next to her as she lay there?
Object to the form of the question.
Overruled.
I didn't care what she had next to her. I wanted to see them.
You know, I have another photograph. You have that marked as 278.
278.
Can you approach your
Yes.
Menendez, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 278. Actually, let me just to here. Does this appear to be the area of the coffee table indicated in the middle of this photograph, sir? The, Exhibit 7?
Yes.
That photograph?
It appears to be, yes.
Can you see what that is that was next to your mother, the letters?
How to enroll, attend without obligation, some sort of parking, registration, etc.
And where is that from?
I assume it's from UCLA.
Does it in fact say UCLA there with respect to the parking?
Yeah, right on the park.
Now, you've testified, sir, that your mother was going to kill you that night, correct?
Yes.
And that's still your belief, is that correct?
Still my belief to this day.
Yes.
Well, if I knew they didn't have any weapons when I walked in the room, I would not have walked in the room. I don't know what my belief to this day is. No, I can't be sure that that's my belief to this day.
Now, if your mother had been planning to kill you, would she have been filling out your application for UCLA?
Objection, Your Honor. It's argumentative and calls for speculation.
Sustained.
I have nothing further at this point, Your Honor.
Redirect.
I may approach Your Honor with 277.
All right.
Mr. Menendez, first I want to call your attention to page 2. 277 has your name. Page 2 has your name on it. Is that right?
Yes.
What is 277? Do you know?
I have no idea. It says,
Well, don't tell me what it says. Do you have any idea what that is?
no,
Have you ever seen something like that before?
no.
Then how can it refresh your recollection about anything?
He was saying that this reflects my recollection.
No. The question is, not can you read the document, but does it really make you remember something that you didn't otherwise remember?
No.
Let's first take through the one that's in your name, okay? All right. Now, it's a series of dates, is that right?
Yes.
Dates for what? Can you tell?
No, I have no idea.
Now, the date of August 9th, for example, do you know where you were on August 9th?
Yes, I
Were you at Harry Hopman's in Wesley Chapel near Tampa, Florida?
was in Florida.
Where were you on August 9th?
I believe I was in Chicago or on a plane back to Los Angeles.
What day did you come back to Los Angeles from Chicago?
August 9th.
So you couldn't have been there then, could you?
No.
And August 4th, 1989, do you know where you were that day?
Yes.
What were you doing that day?
I believe I was playing tennis in Michigan.
Kalamazoo.
Yes.
So you couldn't have been there on that day, and that shows up in this document too, right?
Yes.
Now, how'd you get to Michigan, by the way?
I flew to Michigan.
In a commercial airplane?
Yes, I
Do
believe
you
so.
know what day you flew to Michigan?
No.
Okay. So this says August 3rd. Do you think you were there on August 3rd in Florida, or do you think you were on an airplane to Michigan, or do you think you were in Michigan on that day?
I believe August 3rd was the date that the tournament started.
The tournament in Kalamazoo.
Registration date.
Okay. And were you there to register?
Yes.
So on August 3rd, you were in Michigan.
Yes. Sorry.
So
Objection sustained, the answer is struck.
where were you on August 3rd?
I'm sure I was in Michigan. I was in Chicago the day before, so.
So does it tell you anything about where you were to see the date of August 3rd on this document from Hopkins?
No.
Let's go to the one for your brother then. Now, again, you see that on the top of this document, they have some dates there that say arrive and depart.
Yes.
Now, were you at Hopkins on July 20th? Do you know?
I know that I wasn't.
Where were you on July 20th?
I believe that was the time when the clay courts were being played in Tennessee.
In Louisville?
Yes.
So on August 20th, do you believe you were, strike that, on July 20th, you think you were in Tennessee?
Yes.
Kentucky, actually. Louisville,
Yeah, Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Yes, I was in Kentucky.
Quito, Peru. By the way, do you know what Quito is while we're on the subject?
It's in Peru.
No, it's in, did you ever hear of Quito, Ecuador?
Yeah, I guess it's in Ecuador.
Capital of Ecuador. Did you ever learn that in geography lesson?
Not that I remember.
That's okay, you're in good company. Now, so on July 20th, you're not in Florida.
No.
So how could it tell you anything about who is in Florida on July 20th if you're not there?
I don't know.
Okay, so the fact that it shows July 20th on a bill under your brother's name, that doesn't tell you your brother's there either, does it?
No.
Now, let's go to the bottom of this record. You see August 10th, 1989 on your brother's supposed record?
Yes.
Where was your brother on August 10th, 1989?
He was in California.
And where were you?
I was in California.
And you saw him on August 10th, didn't you?
Yes.
And on August at least 4th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, you are where?
I'm in Michigan.
And when you're in Michigan, Mr. Menendez, do you remember having any contact with your brother back in California?
Yes.
So do you think that, do you believe your brother was in Florida when you were in Michigan? Or was he in California, or do you know?
I don't believe he was in Florida.
Okay. Now, on what basis do you have to say where you were on July 31st before you ever saw these records?
Just my own recollection that I was one of two places.
Okay. You recall that you played in a tournament in Kalamazoo, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall that just before you went to that tournament, you were in training?
Yes.
And was Hopman's the place where you trained?
If that was the name, it was Saddlebrook Yes, Saddlebrook Way, exactly. Hopman's.
Saddlebrook's the country club, isn't it? Hopman's is the name of the tennis camp that's on the grounds of the country club.
Yes, I can't be sure that I was there on July, any of those days though.
You know you were there before Kalamazoo.
Yes,
Now, did you also, while you were in Florida, visit your Aunt Martha?
yes, that's why I can't be sure.
And Aunt Martha lives in Florida?
Yes.
She doesn't live in Tampa, does she?
No, she lives about 2 hours outside of Tampa.
Well, she lives, where does she live?
She lives in West Palm Beach.
Okay. And at any time during that training period before Kalamazoo, did you visit your Aunt Martha at her home in West Palm Beach?
Yes.
And do you now remember on what day or days?
No, it was soon after her birthday because I remember that she had somehow found out where I was and called me to say that I missed her birthday and that she wanted to see me, and so I slept overnight at her house.
Okay, if I could have a microphone.
He was a great tennis player, I believe.
And is that who founded that camp in Florida?
I believe so.
Now, did you also attend Harry Hopman's tennis camp in Florida before you played in the tournament in Louisville?
Yes.
And in fact, when you went to the tournament in Louisville, did you have with you clothing you had purchased at Hopman's?
Yes.
T-shirts and such?
Yes.
Okay. I'm
All
trying
right,
to
let's
find.
just continue and go on to
Yes.
something else.
All right, well, it's complicated. Now, Mr. Menendez, you were asked about making an appointment to see Dr. Oziel and then canceling it. You recall that?
Yes.
And you testified just a few minutes ago that you wanted to talk to him about this problem.
Yes.
And were you going to tell him that your father was molesting you and that it wasn't going to end as you had hoped and prayed for 3 years?
Definitely not.
Objection sustained, the answer is stricken.
What was the problem that you were going to discuss with him had you seen him, or that you intended to discuss with him?
That I no longer wanted to live.
That you what?
No longer wanted to live.
Had you ever seen any other therapist?
No.
Did you know that your mother was seeing a therapist?
Yes.
And did you know how it was that you wound up being directed to Dr. Oziel?
Yes.
And how was that?
She calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Through my mother's therapist.
And did you know what his name was?
Yes.
What was his name?
Lester Summerfield.
And had you received information after your parents died that your mother might have left something with Dr. Summerfield?
Yes, I did.
What was that information?
Just that she might have left she might have left a letter with Lester.
That your mother might have left a letter with Lester?
Yes.
Did she refer to Dr. Summerfield as Lester?
She referred to him as her closest confidant, Lester.
And did you know when she was alive who that was?
No, I don't even remember if I knew the name Lester Summerfield before she was alive or after.
Well, the question was, how did you get to Dr. Oziel? From her, is that what you said?
From her therapist, yes.
Okay. Did you know it was coming from her therapist?
Yes.
So you knew she was seeing a therapist?
Yes.
Overruled.
Now, where did you receive the information that Dr. Summerfield or Lester might have a letter?
From a suicide note that she had left that I found afterwards.
A suicide note you found afterwards?
Yes.
Now, you had found a suicide letter of some kind in 1986. Isn't that what you've already
Yeah, I
testified?
found another one in 1986.
In
In
when?
1986.
You found another one in
I
1986?
found the first one in 1986.
Within a few days of your parents' death, a number of your relatives came to California.
Yes.
And was one of those relatives your father's mother, your grandmother?
Yes.
And was your grandmother at the Beverly Hills house right after your parents died?
Yes, she stayed there.
She stayed there.
Yes.
Did everyone else stay at the Bellage or the Bel Air Hotel?
Yes.
Did your grandmother stay at the house by herself, or did anyone else stay with her?
There were so many relatives there that I don't remember if anyone else stayed with her.
You did not stay at the house during that week, did you?
No.
Now, can you just describe generally what your grandmother was doing, particularly in those first few days at the house after your parents died?
She was going.
Objection sustained. The answer's
Well,
correct.
You were over at the house, you just didn't sleep there.
Yeah, so let's ask it in a leading fashion.
Were you over at the house during that week?
Yes.
Were you over there more than once?
I was over there every day.
And did you see your grandmother when you were over there every day?
Yes.
And what was she doing there?
She was going through everything in the house, specifically my parents' things.
And what was she doing with things as she was going through them?
She was segregating them out, putting some in here and putting some in there.
Was she taking things out of the house?
No, I don't believe she was taking anything out of the house. I know she did eventually. She sort of took over, and nothing left the house without her permission, and you weren't allowed to do things.
All right, let's start with this. You say she took over. How quickly after she arrived did she take over?
Immediately.
And you said you couldn't take things out of the house. Are you referring to yourself or to other people or both?
To basically everyone.
And what about, you said she was looking primarily for things of your parents?
Yes.
And where was she looking?
In my parents' bedroom.
Was she looking in other parts of the house as well?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, you heard testimony of other witnesses that there was in your house in Calabasas, for example, many boxes that occupied the living room area.
Yes.
And were there boxes somewhere at the Beverly Hills house?
Yes.
Boxes from previous moves?
Yes.
What was your mother's habit and practice, Mr. Menendez? When you'd move from one house to another, would she unpack all the boxes, or would she keep some packed, or what?
She'd keep most packed, and they sort of got more and more boxes as you went along.
And was your grandmother going through packed boxes as well?
Yes.
Now, you testified at some point you were concerned that your grandmother might find something in your father's closet that you didn't want her to see.
Yes.
And I think you testified you took those things out of your father's closet.
Yes.
And I think you indicated that a cousin or cousins got rid of it for you.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, when you were arrested in March of 1990, where were you living?
In Marina Del Rey.
And did you, on that occasion, also request the help of a cousin or cousins to get rid of something?
Yes.
And on that occasion, when you were arrested, do you know which cousin you specifically asked?
Yes.
And on that occasion in March, who did you ask?
My cousin Andy.
And had you been with your cousin Andy for some period of time, been together with him when you asked him to do you this favor?
I
Well, let me ask you. You testified you flew here from Florida.
Yes.
Who flew with you?
Oh, Andy flew with me then, yes.
Now, when you got here on this flight from Florida, did you have an opportunity to go back to your apartment?
No, I was taken from the airport by Detective Zoller to Los Angeles County Jail.
And you never had an opportunity to go back to your apartment, I take it.
No.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you had asked your cousin Andy to get rid of something from your apartment?
Objection reading.
Yes.
Now, what did you expect to happen to your possessions in your apartment when you were arrested in March of 1990?
I expected my my relatives to go through it and store some of it and box it and so on.
Where was your grandmother living in March of 1990 when you were arrested?
At the Beverly Hills house.
So she was living here.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Did you have any expectation with respect to your grandmother having any contact with your personal possessions in your apartment?
Yes.
What did you expect?
I expected that her, my Aunt Martha, and different people to go through my apartment.
And was it in anticipation of that that you asked Andy to get rid of something?
Objection reading.
Why did you want Andy, without describing, why did you want Andy to get rid of something?
Because there were some things in my apartment that I wanted Andy to get rid of before my relatives saw.
Okay, so there were things you didn't want them to see.
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, did Andy do that, get rid of these things by himself or with the help of someone else? Well, Your Honor, it has to do with his state of mind. It's not being offered for the truth. Well, I'd like to be heard on this. Okay. Now, you testified that there were these things removed from your father's closet, and you had asked who to remove those from the house?
My cousin Henry.
And to the best of your current recollection, did Andy help Henry on that occasion?
No.
To the best of your current knowledge, did Henry help Andy on the second occasion?
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, did your cousin Henry, during that week after your parents died, get rid of the things you had given him to get rid of?
Yes.
Did you ever see those things again?
No.
It's noon, Your Honor.
All right, we'll recess until 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 1:30.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Yes, I previously marked 279 and 280. They're showing me the photograph that's been marked 279. Okay, would you look at that?
Yes.
Okay, who's that in the photograph?
That's myself.
And where are you? What city or town are you in when that photograph was taken?
Kentucky. I'm in Wendy's.
And what city?
Louisville?
Louisville.
Louisville.
All right. And you were there for that particular tennis tournament?
Yes, I was.
And do you remember these tournaments based on the surface of the tennis courts you were playing on?
Yes, I do.
And what surface was being played on at Louisville?
Clay. These were the clay courts.
And if you would look at the lower right-hand corner of that photograph, does that photograph have a date on it?
Yes, it does.
And what was the date?
July 27th, 1989.
Now, one other thing before you give it to me. Are you wearing a T-shirt in that photograph?
Yes.
And where is the T-shirt from?
Saddlebrook Country Club, Harry Hopman's.
From Hopman's.
Mhm.
Now, is it your recollection that you were at Hopman's before this date of July 27th, 1989, when you're wearing the Hopman's T-shirt in Louisville?
Yes, I was.
So let me show you 277 again, this document that Mr. Kuriyama showed you. Do you see any dates on this document that would cover the period when you were there, when you obtained that T-shirt?
No, there are not.
Now let me show you this other photograph, which is 280. Okay?
Yes.
And who's in that photograph?
My mom and my dad.
And where was that photograph taken?
I believe in Kentucky as well.
In Louisville?
Yes.
And what kind of place was it taken in?
At a hotel.
And is this inside a hotel room, or is it inside the dining room, and where is it?
I think it's inside the hotel room.
Did you all stay in the same hotel room?
No.
And where did you stay at this hotel in relation to your parents?
I stayed in the next room, next door.
And did your father, during the time you were in Louisville playing the clay courts, ever visit you in your hotel room?
Yes.
For what purpose?
For sex.
Mr. Menendez, you recall Mr. Kuriyama suggesting to you that your mother was only 5 feet 2 inches tall?
Yes.
Now I have another document, and I'd like to mark it next to memorial. No, not next to memorial, I'm sorry. I'd like to mark it 291. 291.
You have some other documents there that you can be marking.
They're already marked, Your Honor, a series of photographs in between.
$291.
Thank you. Mr. Menendez, you recognize this to be an enlargement of your mother's driver's license.
Yes.
And do you see the height that's indicated on that driver's license?
Yes.
And what height is it?
5'5".
And do you see the date of birth, October 14th, 1944?
Yes.
Was October 14th the day of your mother's birthday?
Yes, it was.
Was she born in 1944?
No.
When was she born?
1941.
Did your mother lie about her age?
Sustained.
Did you ever hear your mother lying about her age?
Yes.
Was your mother older than your father?
Yes.
By how much?
Overall.
3 years.
Now, Your Honor, I have a series of photographs marked 281 through 288. Actually, I have them marked through 290, but I'm only going to use the 288 at this moment. Mr. Menendez, you've testified that on August 18th, you and your brother went to a store in an effort to buy handguns. You recall that?
Yes.
And you testified that you went to the Big Five in Santa Monica. You recall that?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, when you testified to that, did you know where the Big Five in Santa Monica was?
I thought I did.
Where did you think it was?
On Santa Monica Boulevard, 1 or 2 blocks away from the freeway.
Okay. And if I were to tell you that the Big Five in Santa Monica is 1.5 miles from the freeway and it's on Wilshire Boulevard, okay, would you accept that for the moment?
Yes.
Now, when was it that you, let me ask you this, from the day that you went to this store where you inquired about handguns, until the day that you were arrested, did you have in mind that it was a Big Five store?
No.
As of the day that you were arrested, did you realize or know that the store in San Diego where you had bought guns from was a Big Five?
No.
When was it or what occurred that made you understand that it was a Big Five in San Diego where you bought the shotguns?
When I read about it in the paper.
And after you were arrested?
Yes.
Now, over the course of the 3 years that you've lived in California, have you frequented sporting goods stores?
Yes, of course.
Do you always go to the same chain or the same type or the same one?
No, it doesn't matter.
What different chains or types of sporting goods stores have you gone to over the 3 years that you lived in California?
Sports Mart, Turner's, Hoshman's. I know I used to go to Herman's a lot, Sears.
And Big Five?
Big Five, of course. I don't even know the names of all of them.
Okay. And you went frequently to such stores?
Yes, I used to play tennis, and so I'd go there a lot.
Okay. Now, which was the stronger memory, if you can compare them? The memory that the store was on Santa Monica Boulevard, a block and a half from the freeway, or the memory that it was a Big Five?
That it was within a block and a half from the freeway in Santa Monica.
Do you know now where that store, the store that you looked at guns, was?
No.
I'm going to show you some photographs. Starting with 281. The question is, does 281, what's depicted there, look at all familiar to you?
Yes. Yes.
Does it in any way resemble the store that you believe you were in on that Friday, August 18th?
Yes, it does.
And drawing your attention to what's in the center of that photograph, what does that appear to be? This object.
Those are handguns in a glass case.
Now, would you look at the next photograph? Is that a slightly closer view and a better colored photograph?
Yes.
And does that case appear similar to the case in the store that you were in on August 18th?
Yeah, it had several levels.
Now, you recall testifying earlier that the top level had handguns.
Yes.
You recall testifying earlier that the handguns you saw did not have the revolver part, in other words, the cylinder part.
Yes.
Would you look onto the next, let's go 2 down. Let's go to this one. Look at 286. Do those appear to be the kind of non-revolver guns that you saw on August 18th?
Which one? They both appear. No.
No?
No, they do not have revolvers. I didn't hear the question.
Okay. If you don't hear the question, say you don't hear the question. Let's look at 286, this one, okay? Do you see the guns on the top row?
Yes.
Do those appear to be the same shape guns that you saw on August 18th?
Yeah.
This picture, Mr. Menendez.
Yes.
Okay, now you want to look at the next one, so go ahead. Those appear to be the same shape guns as the one you saw on August 18th.
Objection, there's no foundation of this.
We will tie it up.
Objection overruled, but stop leading the witness. Ask him in a different fashion.
All right. Okay,
Yes.
did these appear similar?
Yes.
The ones that just went up are 86 and 87. Now going back to 283, in that photograph, are there different things on the different shelves of this glass display case?
Yes.
What's on the top shelf?
Handguns.
And I would like to show you 284 next. Do you see what's up on the wall in that photograph?
Yes.
Now, do you have any recollection in this store that you were in on August 18th to seeing long guns?
Yes, there were a rack of them behind.
Does that appear at all similar to what you saw in the store on the 18th?
Yes, it's very similar.
And this is 284. Now, do you recall whether or not there was ammunition behind this glass case,
Yes, there was.
showing you the last two photographs, 285 and then 288, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Does that appear to be similar to what you saw on August 18th?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, the guns that you are looking at, that you've seen in these photographs, are they real or are they fake?
Apparently, they're not real.
What do they look like to you?
They look like real handguns.
Okay, you know where these photos were taken, don't you?
Yes.
Looking at these photographs, can you tell if they're real or they're fake?
No.
Where were these photos taken, Mr. Menendez?
At the Big Five in Santa Monica.
And do you know when these photos were taken at the Big Five in Santa Monica?
Sometime between Friday and today.
Between last Friday and today?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, do you know if the guns that you saw on August 18, 1989, if any of them were in fact real?
I believe that they were.
You believe that they were, but do you know if they were?
No.
Did you handle any of them?
No.
Did anybody take one out of the case?
No, I said before, no one did.
Did anybody put ammunition in it?
No.
Did anybody show you how to operate it?
No.
Did anybody describe to you what the make or manufacturer or caliber or type or model of the gun was?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember it?
I don't believe they did that. They didn't take it out of the case.
Now, what is the thing that most stands out in your mind about this trip to a store on August 18th here in Los Angeles? What is it that most impressed you about that trip?
That we couldn't get handguns there.
And why couldn't you get handguns there? Because they didn't have handguns? Is that what you understood?
Sustained.
Why was it you couldn't get handguns there?
Because there was a 2-week waiting period.
Now, you have described in part some conversation with the clerk. Is that right?
Yes.
How many people were taking part in this exchange with the clerk?
My brother, I, and the clerk.
Were there any other customers around or engaging the clerk's attention during the time that you and your brother were in front of the glass case?
Yeah, I believe there were all kinds of people around.
And were you having a continuous conversation with the clerk, or was it a series of brief conversations?
Objection.
It was not a continuous conversation. He was distracted.
Now, do you recall whether or not you asked him any specific questions about any particular gun?
I just remember the one specific question that I asked.
And what was the one specific question that you asked?
I asked if one of the guns, I pointed to one, was a real gun.
And what was his response, if you can remember, to that specific question?
He said that it wasn't, that it was a BB gun.
Now, do you recall making any assumptions at that point?
Objection being.
Excuse me?
Do you recall in your mind making any assumptions at that point about any of the other guns?
At that point, I don't remember.
Do you recall making any assumptions at any point about any of the other guns?
Yes.
And what assumption did you make about other guns?
I assumed that they were real.
Now, Mr. Menendez, do you remember the exact words that you used in your conversation with the clerk when you indicated you wanted to buy a handgun?
No.
Do you remember the general gist of of whatever it was you said to him?
Yes.
What did you say to him?
I told him that we needed to buy a handgun for protection now, today.
And do you recall do you remember specifically what this clerk said back to you, or just the gist?
I don't remember specifically what he said back. I never did.
What do you recall, though, being at least what you got from what he was saying?
Like I said, I don't remember the conversation back and forth, but I know that he told me that you could not buy handguns in one day.
Did he say you can't buy that gun, or did he say you can't buy a gun like that, or any words to that effect?
Objection, leading and suggesting.
Sustained.
Did he say that immediately after you had said you needed to buy a handgun for self-protection?
I'm sure that I indicated that I needed to buy it right then.
My question was, did he say it after you said something about self-protection?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
You just testified you said something about self-protection, is that correct?
Yes.
How soon after that did the clerk say, there's a 2-week waiting period for whatever he said, guns like that gun, a gun?
I believe right after.
Now, when you testified about this last Friday, do you recall saying that you couldn't remember clearly, but you remembered looking through the case at the different guns?
Yes.
Do you remember testifying that the three of us, meaning yourself, your brother, and the clerk, were talking, but you don't really remember?
Yes.
Do you remember testifying in response to another question
This was last Friday?
the last Friday, that you didn't remember the conversation, that you think you were talking about what the guns were? Do you recall that?
Yes.
That you asked if you could buy one now?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, looking at that rack of long guns, if you look at the upper right-hand photograph,
Okay.
do you know if any of those are real or fake?
I'm not sure I know anything anymore, but I believe that they
About
are
guns,
real.
anyway.
I believe that they are real.
You believe all of them in that photograph are real, is that correct?
I don't know. I thought that some were real and that some were not.
Somewhat were real.
Some of the shotguns and long rifles.
You said you believed some were real and some were not. When are you talking about? When did you believe that?
At the store.
And you believed at the store that some of the long guns were real and some were not real.
Objection, leading.
Overall.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
And did you believe the same about the handguns?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Menendez, are you aware of the fact that there is a Big Five store on Sepulveda Boulevard near the 405 freeway?
Yes.
You're aware of that since when?
Since this week.
Are you aware of the fact that there is a sports mart on Sepulveda Boulevard near the freeway?
Objection, irrelevant.
Sustained.
Mr. Menendez, are you identifying these photographs with certainty as the place where you had this inquiry about guns, or as a similar looking place?
It's similar looking.
At this point, do you know where you were when you had this discussion with the man about buying a handgun?
No.
Just to complete the series, Your Honor, let me show you these two photographs. Do you know where that is?
I'm not sure.
Just put it up. Your Honor, this is just a view of the street. And it reads with a blue street sign, Franklin and Wilshire.
And that is exhibit
289. Now I'm going to show you this other photograph, which is 290. You can see what that is, can't you?
Yes.
What is that a photograph of?
The Big Five Sporting Goods store.
Okay. Can you tell from the photograph which Big Five it is?
No.
You want the record to reflect this bears a street number of 3121. Mr. Menendez, to change the subject, you recall being shown on the witness stand a record of your Department of Motor Vehicle history.
Yes.
Now, you recall testifying that you had lost your driver's license and that you had received a ticket for driving without a license in your possession on July 7th, 1989.
Yes.
And you recall on cross-examination, you told Mr. Kuriyama you had also received a ticket for driving without a license in your possession on June 30th.
Yes.
Have you seen that DMV record again?
Yes.
Now, what year, June 30th, did you also receive a ticket for driving without a license?
In 1988.
And did you lose your driver's license more than once?
Yes.
You testified that on the night of August 20th, you changed your pants from clothing that you had in your car. Recall that?
Yes.
Why did you have clothing in your car?
Because it would pile up over time.
Why would it be there in the first place?
Because I would change to and from the tennis matches. Often tennis matches were in Long Beach or far away. And I'd bring the clothes with me.
Okay, will you change after the tennis match?
Sometimes I'd change in the car.
And would you change into street clothes?
Yes.
So why would street clothes pile up in the car?
Excuse me?
Why would street clothes pile up in the car?
Because I would change when I went to tennis matches.
Or you change when you'd go to the match?
Yes.
Okay. And would you change after the match also?
Sometimes it depended.
Mr. Kuriyama indicated that in one of the rooms of your home there was a Martin Luther King poster. You recall that question?
Yes.
Who bought the Martin Luther King poster, Mr. Menendez?
My brother.
Where did he buy it?
I believe in Venice.
When did he buy it?
I believe the week before.
The week before your parents died?
Yes.
And in your home, was this poster just propped against the wall or was it framed and hung?
I don't believe it was hung, but it was up against the wall. I was going to take it with him to college.
Do you know a young woman named Tracy Baker?
Yes.
Was she a friend of yours or a friend of your brother's?
She was a friend of my brother's.
In the fall of 1988, do you remember an occasion when Miss Baker was at your home in Beverly Hills for dinner?
Yes, I do.
And did something unusual happen?
Yes.
And would you tell the jury what happened?
She was overeating dinner, and my mom was serving. Apparently the maid was off or something like that. And we were all sitting down at the table, and my mom had served dinner, and my dad pushed the tray away, this plate, toward my mom, and spilled something and told my brother and I to get up from the table.
Vegas time.
Specify again what it was.
Was this in the fall of 1988?
Yes.
Now, do you recall whether or not your father said anything to your mother as he pushed the plate away or at any time during this?
Yes.
What did he say? It's not being offered for the truth, Your Honor, but for the defendant's state of mind.
We received that from the judges.
Thank you, Your Honor.
He looked at my mom, and then he said something like, "What did you do to the food?" or "What are you up to?" or something like that.
Okay. Now, did you understand what was going on?
Yes.
Again, it is offered for his state of mind.
Only for his state of mind, Your Honor.
It will be received for that purpose only.
What, Mr. Menendez, did you believe was going on?
I believe that my dad thought my mom poisoned the food.
Was this the only time that this sort of thing happened, where your dad pushed the food away and left?
No.
And on the other occasions when it happened, would he say anything to your mother?
Yes.
Now, did you eat at home your mother's cooking when your father wasn't around?
Yes.
And how would you know to eat the food or not eat the food?
I would normally eat the food unless I thought something was very wrong with my mother. You could usually tell what my mom's mood was or what she was up to by the way she looked or different signs she'd give you.
And were there times when you, without your father's prompting, would not eat the food because of either a look or her mood or something she had said? Were there times when you didn't eat food when your father wasn't home?
Yes.
And what was the basis for your refusal to eat food on those occasions?
Sometimes she said earlier in the day that she was going to poison us all, and so I wouldn't eat the food. And sometimes it was just my belief that she might have done something to the food.
Now, on this particular occasion, we'll strike that. Do you ever recall this happening, your father refusing to eat the food and asking your mother this sort of question, when there was a stranger present, apart from this time?
No.
And on this occasion, when Miss Baker is there, what happened after your father said something to your mother?
We left. He told us to get up from the table, and Lyle, I, Tracy, and I don't believe anyone else was there, left. We went out to eat.
You and Lyle and Tracy?
Yes.
Anybody else?
I don't remember.
How about your father?
Well, of course, my dad's the one that told us to get up from the table.
Okay, so you and your father, Tracy and Lyle, went out to eat.
Yes.
What'd your mother do?
She stayed home.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Mr. Menendez,
You testified that you were very concerned when you learned in May of 1989 that your father was talking about disowning you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what did disown mean to you?
Death. That he was going to kill me.
And why would disowning you, cutting you off altogether, mean death?
Well, it was just my impression of what it meant, because he clearly wasn't going to disown me.
I don't understand why you say that. Why wasn't he going to disown you?
Because he wasn't going to let me leave the house.
Why?
Well, because obviously the things that were going on between him and I, he was never going to let me leave the house with that information.
So he wasn't going to let you take the secret away? Is that what you
Yes.
You say he wasn't going to let you leave the house. What do you think would have been his fear?
That I would eventually tell someone, or that I would have told someone out of anger toward him or something like that.
So when you heard this talk about disown, what did you imagine happening?
That he would kill me.
Now, Mr. Kuriyama asked you something about wanting to kill your parents. On August 20th, 1989, Mr. Menendez, did you want to kill your parents?
No.
What did you want?
I just wanted the sex to end.
Is that why you shot them, to end the sex?
No, at that point I just wanted to live.
And on Tuesday, when you talked to your brother, did you want to set in motion a chain of events that would result in your shooting your parents?
No, definitely not.
What did you want by talking to your brother on Tuesday?
I wanted the sex between my father and I to end.
Now, in the fall of 1988, you've testified that there was an act of sodomy between yourself and your father in which he used a knife. You remember testifying about that?
Yes.
Questions beyond the scope?
It's just a follow-up to this line of questioning which was prompted, Your Honor.
Did you wish to be heard at sidebar?
Yes, if you wish. Did I have an answer to the last one, Your Honor?
Well, let's see if we have a question in mind first. Want to ask it again?
Yeah, I'll ask it again. Mr. Menendez, you recall testifying that in the fall of 1988, your father sodomized you in an incident involving a knife.
Yes.
And how did you feel after that?
I felt awful. I couldn't wait to get to college.
And did you tell your brother at that time about the molestation with your father?
No.
And did you have any thoughts at that time about having to kill your father or your mother or anything like that?
No.
And in May of 1989, you've testified was the last time your father sodomized you. Was
Yes.
that a pleasant experience?
No.
And did you tell your brother about it at that time?
No.
And did you have any thoughts at that time that you wanted to kill your parents or you might be forced to kill your parents or anything like that?
No.
How did you cope with these things, Mr. Menendez?
I thought about the future.
And what was there in the future that you believe helped you to cope with this?
Objection, Your Honor.
That I would be able to get away from my father, that the sex would end.
Okay. And what was going to be the vehicle for your getaway?
College.
Now, what was it that you felt after the conversation that you had with your father that Sunday, where he told you he expected you to be sleeping at home several nights a week?
I felt like my life had crumbled. It felt like something that I read in a book.
You felt like something you read in a book?
Yes.
What book? Do you remember? Well, tell us. What is it tell us what it is that it made you feel like.
I felt like I was, I felt like I no longer wanted to live.
What is it you read in the book that
It was about a man in a concentration camp who, in Nazi Germany, who thought he was going to get released on March 30th of a date I don't remember. And on March 30th, he wasn't released, and he knew that he wasn't going to be. And March 31st, he died.
and you felt like it was March 31st?
Objection be.
And how did you feel that Sunday after your father told you that you'd still have to come home?
I just related to that a lot. I felt like the hope in the future was gone.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any examination on behalf of,
Co-defendant?
No.
Any recross?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, you recall the testimony of your brother on September 17th, wherein he stated that you and he had gone to the Big Five store in Santa Monica?
Never mind. I just want to know which September 17th you meant.
I believe he said that.
And he had testified in front of these juries that you and he had inquired about handguns in that Big Five store in Santa Monica, correct?
I don't know. If he did, then he did.
And he further testified that you and he were in the process of buying a handgun when you were told you weren't going to be able to leave the store with the handgun. Do you remember that?
I know he testified to that, yes.
And it would take 2 weeks.
Yes, that's what I mainly remember.
And do you recall testimony that you gave on September 27th,
That I recall better.
volume 94? And this is a question by your attorney, Mrs. Abramson. in which she asks you, on Friday, did you hear your brother testify that you went with him to a gun store, a Big Five in Santa Monica? And you responded, yeah. And inquire about buying handguns? Yes. And were you told that there was a 2-week waiting period? Yes. Is that true? Yes. Did you do that? Yes. Do you remember all of that?
Yes, we did do that. That's exactly right.
Do you remember testifying on October 1st regarding the Big Five in Santa Monica?
What day is October 1st?
It was a Friday.
Last Friday.
Yes.
Do you remember testifying about the Big Five store in Santa Monica?
Objection, vague, Your Honor.
Overruled.
With you questioning me?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Do you remember testifying that you saw the handguns in a glass case?
I believe I said that. If you could show me the testimony, then I'd be able to clarify myself.
I'll put you on.
You have it there?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
$16,485. Take a look at your testimony.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you testified that you saw handguns in a glass case, correct?
Yes.
And you identified them as being handguns, correct?
Yes, they were.
Do you remember page 16,486? You remember testifying, sir, that you asked if these were real. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember me asking you, and what did he say? That is the clerk to the store.
Yes.
And you stated, he said he pointed out which ones were and which ones were not. I believe the ones that were not were over to the right. That is the pellet guns or the BB guns. I believe they were over to the right. And the real ones were more in the center where I was. Do you remember making that statement?
Can I finish the paragraph?
Yes.
I said, that's my recollection. I could be wrong. But that is my recollection.
That you saw real guns and he told you where the real guns were.
That I could be wrong about, but that I saw real guns, yes. When I left that store that day, I believe they were real guns to this day.
And at some point, you picked out a handgun that you thought was appropriate. Is that right? And you answered yes. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you testified further that as soon as we said, that one looks good and that type of thing, we talked about, could we get it now?
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Correct.
Counsel, would you cite where you're reading from?
16,488,
Yes, what?
line 9. You
I
remember?
would object if that's misreading the testimony.
Do you remember testifying in that way? You can look at the testimony yourself.
Would you like me to read the paragraph?
Go ahead.
Your question too? You said, do you recall the caliber that you decided on? And I said, I really don't. I wasn't, as soon as we said, that one looks good and that type of thing, we talked about, could we get it now? How do you go about buying it? That's when he told us we had to, there was some sort of waiting period. And so I didn't, it wasn't an in-depth discussion.
And you indicated to him that you needed to buy 2 handguns, correct?
I believe that's what I indicated to him.
And you remember him telling you that you could not leave the store with the handgun, correct?
Object misstates the testimony.
Overruled. That's a question.
If you could show me it,
Did you testify to that?
that I could not leave the store with the handgun, I don't believe so.
You don't recall testifying that way?
Objection, Your Honor, there is no such testimony.
Okay, counsel, it's just objection. That's not an evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, objection overruled. There's a question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you remember, sir, me asking you the question, page 16,000? 5 store on the morning of August 18th to buy these handguns? Your answer, definitely,
Definitely.
without a doubt, I did.
Yes.
And you and Lyle did, and you answered yes, correct?
Yes.
And then the question was, and you and Lyle actually looked in this case, and you selected these guns, and you were told you couldn't leave the store with those handguns because there's a 15-day wait, and you answered yes.
Yes.
And then the question was, Mr. Menendez, did you know that Big Five stopped carrying handguns on March of 1986? And you said, no, I don't know that, correct?
Well, that wasn't the end of my answer.
Do you remember making this statement, sir?
I said, no, I don't know that, Mr. Kuriyama. There were guns there. We did look at them, and he did say we could not carry them anymore.
So you couldn't carry them out of the store that day.
No, that's not what I said.
Sir, are you now trying to tell these juries that it was a pellet gun you were looking at that day?
No, what I'm saying now is that I still believe that there were handguns in the store that I went to. And whether the store, I'm saying now that I was wrong about something. The store that the Big Five was not on Santa Monica Boulevard, 1 to 2 blocks from the freeway. The store that I remember going to was. But if I did go to the Santa Monica Big Five, I still believed that they carried handguns, and apparently they didn't. So my impression was wrong.
Do you remember testifying that the Santa Monica Big Five store was the closest Big Five to your house?
That I knew of, yes.
So you had been to the Santa Monica Big Five store before?
I don't remember it being so, but I'm sure that I did.
Because you testified that you knew where it was. You knew it was the closest one to your house.
I knew that it was the closest one to my house. I didn't know there was any near my house closer than that.
The man at the Big Five store in Santa Monica told you couldn't leave the store with those handguns, correct?
I don't remember exactly what he said, but my impression was that we had to wait 2 weeks. That was
Are you
my
now saying
impression.
that you're assuming that that's what he said?
Excuse me?
When you were questioned by your counsel, you said that you assumed that they were real, wherein you had testified that he had told you that they were real, and you said the real ones were in the center where you were, and the fake ones were off to the side, correct?
No, I said that that's what my impression was, but that I could be wrong is exactly what I said.
You
But
were
it's still my impression.
told those are real handguns you were looking at. And now that you know that Big Five didn't have real handguns, you're coming up with a different story, aren't you, sir?
Sir, I described exactly where Big Five was to you. I described exactly where it was. I knew you could easily go and check it out. I wasn't lying to you. I still believe that the gun store that I went to carried handguns. When I left that store, my impression was that they looked exactly like real handguns, that they were real handguns. That's what I thought when I left the store, and that's what I thought when I testified. You shocked me when you said that there were no handguns there. I thought you also meant there were no anything that looked like handguns there. And my impression is now there were real handguns there. That's what I believe.
You testified that, in fact, the clerk had told you there were real handguns. In fact, told you couldn't leave the store without waiting for 15 days with that handgun, correct?
Objection asked.
No, that's not exactly what I said. I testified that the clerk said that these are real and that these are not. And I said, I believe that's what he said. And I said that he testified I couldn't leave the store without waiting 15 days.
Sir, if there weren't real handguns in the store, you could have bought any one of those pellet guns, correct? And you left the store that day.
I don't know what the waiting period is on pellet guns.
Oh, is there a waiting period on BB guns and pellet guns?
What I'm saying is, I don't know if there is.
Now, he would not have told you that you had a 15-day waiting period unless you were talking about real handguns, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
In fact, you had seen, or you testified, you saw these real handguns,
Yes.
and that the clerk told you couldn't leave with the real handgun unless you waited 15 days. Isn't that true?
In that paraphrase, I don't know how I could answer that, but My memory is that I had a conversation with the clerk and that Lyle was there, that there were other people around, and that we had a discussion about real handguns. And I believe to this day that the guns in that glass case were real, and that he said that we had to wait 15 days to buy a handgun.
Were you imagining this?
No, I wasn't imagining it, sir. It's still in my memory. It's still there. And that's what happened.
Now, you've had about a week to think about what you're going to tell these jurors to explain how you lied about this.
Objection.
I didn't lie.
Argumentative.
Objection sustained. Rephrase the question.
Have you been discussing this with your brother?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overall.
Cause for hearsay.
Overall.
Certainly I did.
We talked about how we're going to get out of this one?
No, I'll tell you what I have been thinking over the last week, if you'd like me to, though.
Now, you've been thinking about what you can say to explain how there aren't any handguns at the store you said you were at. Is that right?
No, sir. What I was thinking about,
No question pending. Now, Mr. Menendez, you indicated that on August 18th, you were suicidal, correct?
yes, I was.
And you had a meeting set up with
Objection,
Dr.
that misstates his testimony.
Overall.
And you had a session set up with Dr. Oziel for that day, correct?
I don't believe I did so anymore on August 18th. I had canceled it by then.
You had decided that you wouldn't go to see Dr. Oziel because you had spoken to your brother and you decided that you'd kill your parents instead of killing yourself. Isn't that right?
Definitely not.
May I have a moment, Sean? Mr. Menendez, you indicated that your mother was about as tall as your brother, right?
I said that I thought she was 3 inches shorter than him.
And do you remember me asking you whether you were aware that the coroner had measured your mother as 5'2"? That I didn't tell you that that's how tall she was, but I indicated to you that the coroner had measured her at 5'2". Isn't that correct?
Yes, apparently.
Did your counsel misstate that?
No,
Excuse me, could you ask that question?
Yeah, did your counsel misstate the question when she asked you?
Object to what his counsel said, Your Honor. It's not
Rephrase the question.
Do you remember when your counsel said that Mr. Kuriyama said that your mother was 5'2"?
Your Honor, I object to that as if.
apparently the coroner was wrong.
Okay, the question I asked you is whether you were aware that the coroner had measured your mother at 5'2", correct?
The question that you asked?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
I have nothing further to say.
Mr. Menendez, you were anxious to tell us what you were thinking. So what were you thinking?
When?
When Mr. Kuriyama asked you what you were thinking this last week after you realized that at least as far as a Big Five in Santa Monica, they don't sell real handguns, just things that look like handguns.
Well,
So,
they're handguns. They just use pellets. I was thinking about how I could be wrong when I was quite sure that I was right.
yeah, well, you were quite sure you were right about your mother buying a gun at the Sports Mart that she bought at Best, right?
Well, I'm not doubting all of my memories. No,
Okay.
she did do that.
She did do that, but you had the name of that store wrong too, didn't you?
Yeah, apparently she bought it at Best and not Smart Mart.
Let me ask you something. In your family, if your father was asking you questions and you didn't have complete answers with all the blanks filled in, what would happen to you?
Objection irrelevant.
Do you have a habit and pattern and custom when being pressured for answers to do something?
Question irrelevant.
Sustained.
I'd like to be heard on this, Your Honor.
No, you're asking why he answered something a certain way?
Asking if he has the tendency to fill in blanks.
Ask him, rather than that, which is irrelevant, ask.
If he did
focusing on
here.
Something specific.
With respect to this conversation with a clerk in some sporting goods store, okay?
Yes.
In your memory, before you testified about this, were there blank parts?
Of course.
Do you have a tendency with respect to answering that kind, well, strike that. In answering those questions for Mr. Kuriyama, did you fill in the blanks?
I thought,
Objection vague.
I don't remember exactly what the clerk said, but I thought that there were real handguns there, and so I thought that he said that.
You thought he had actually said they were real
Objection.
handguns. Is that what you're saying?
Objection sustained, answer.
You thought he really said what?
That there were real handguns there.
Even though you didn't remember him really saying that.
Objection.
Objection sustained.
Did you actually remember him saying that?
I don't have a clear memory of, no, I don't have a memory of him saying those words, but I have a memory of discussing it, I thought.
Mr. Menendez, do you know what it's like when people are having a conversation where one's talking about apples and the other one's talking about oranges?
Objection irrelevant.
Is it possible, given your memory, that you misunderstood the clerk?
It's
Objection calls for speculation.
it's possible, but it's possible.
Did you believe that you were looking at real handguns?
Yes,
Did you mention to him you needed a gun for protection?
yes,
You think a BB gun is useful for protection?
no.
Nothing further.
Anything else? Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Menendez, you fill in the blanks, and you were kind of confused as to whether this was the Big Five store. Is that right? Is that what you're trying to say now?
Objection, that's a compound.
Overall.
No, I don't mean to say that I fill in the blanks. I thought that we had a conversation about real handguns. I know that he didn't point to every handgun and say, no, that isn't real, but I thought that the other ones were real. I still,
Now, you were saying that you might have been confused about which store your mother had bought a gun a year earlier, correct?
apparently I was.
Do you remember that gun you said when your mother died, you were hoping that she would kill your father with it?
Yeah, I was hoping that.
Now, is it your understanding that your brother was confused about buying or going to the Big Five in Santa Monica, and that your own attorney was also confused as well as you?
I'm going to object on two different bases. Number one,
All right, objection sustained. Rephrase the question.
Okay. Could it be, Mr. Menendez, that your brother, you, and your lawyer were all confused about the Big Five store in San
Objection, Your
Diego and Santa Monica?
Objection sustained. Rephrase the question.
Mr. Menendez, you've heard your own brother say that you went to the Big Five store in Santa Monica, correct?
Yes,
You've testified to that unequivocally. You said without a doubt, correct?
that I went there. I believe that without a doubt that I did.
And your attorney even asked you the question, are you sure you went to that Santa
Well,
Monica
she
Big
got
Five
that
store?
information from me. She wasn't there with me when I was looking at the handgun.
So she wasn't confused.
object to what I was or wasn't, Your Honor.
All right, just rephrase the question.
Are you saying that your brother was also confused about this?
Objection to speculation.
Overall.
No, my brother didn't know it was a Big Five before he testified. I told him that 2 years ago when we were discussing, we were trying to figure out the store we went to in San Diego.
And you're positive about that?
Oh, I know that. He's sure that we went there to look at guns.
Okay.
And he apparently remembers that we were in the process of buying it. I don't remember that.
Thank you.
I don't think you finished the answer.
All right, then if you want to have them finish it, you can ask the question.
May I do it from here? Did you finish, Mr. Menendez?
No, I hadn't.
Why don't you finish?
I can remember where I was.
Let me ask you a question. No. You said 2 years ago your brother wasn't sure what the store was where you addicted to handguns in Los Angeles?
Yeah, he apparently thought it was,
Objection mistakes the evidence.
Overall.
yes.
And you convinced him it was a Big Five in Santa.
I told him that that's absolutely what it was because that's what I had remembered it was.
Did him a favor.
No, I didn't do him a favor. I explained to him how we got there in Santa Monica and how it was 2 blocks away from the freeway and how I was absolutely positive about that. And that it was the Big Five.
Mr. Menendez, do you believe the 405 freeway is in Santa Monica?
I thought it was. I have a clear memory of
Let's use the freeway, the San Diego freeway. Do you believe it's in the city of Santa Monica?
yes.
Nothing further.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. May step down. Let's, continue that. Let me see counsel at the sidebar here.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is take a recess here, excuse the gold jury for the balance of the day. The blue jury will remain because there's further testimony that will relate to only that jury. And when the gold jury leaves, you are not to be concerned with or speculate about what is going on here in regards to evidence that you're not hearing. And if counsel can sit down so I can see all the jurors, it would help me. And also, don't discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about it. Don't permit yourselves to be exposed to anything about this case in any form whatsoever outside of the courtroom. And we'll have you all back Tuesday. Monday is a legal holiday, so we'll have you here on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, at which time we'll resume. Have a good weekend. Have a good holiday. We'll see you back here Tuesday at 9 o'clock. As to the other jury, we'll have you come back at 10 minutes after 3. Don't discuss this case, and we'll see you all back here at 10 after 3. All right, would you stand, please? Your order to return Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. May I be excused for a few moments, please?
Yes. And is there any need for defendant Lyle Menendez to be here and his counsel for these matters?
Certainly no need for Mr. Menendez to be here. I think Mr. Burton and I want to take stages to make sure that nothing develops that we should be aware of may come back to haunt us.
Certainly. All right, then before we resume, then we'll just proceed with Erik Menendez in court. What are the matters that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I would like to discuss the screenplay and the burglaries and communication of the limits as to questioning with regard to those two instances, or the burglaries and screenplay.
I'm not sure what Mr. Crown means by the screenplay. I think there's no ruling already that the content of a particular screenplay he was originally seeking to edit. It's not admissible and nothing developed.
If I may be heard, John?
I don't think I finished.
All right, go ahead.
There was nothing on direct examination with the content of the screenplay at all. And there seems to be no enhanced relevance to the content of the screenplay at all. In fact, on the contrary, if you look at page 7696 of the transcript, which Mr. Kuriyama has excised here, the court, in referring to their offer of proof that the screenplay should come in because it shows a knowledge that wills produce inheritance, clearly my client has that knowledge. He just discussed that. So I don't see any purpose for a screenplay to prove what he openly discussed he knew. Means he's disinherited, means he's out of the will, or that he could be disinherited from a will. And there's been ample discussion of that. Clearly he knew that.
All right, Mr. Kuriyama, what is it that you wanted to go into?
Your Honor, in this case, the defense has put on evidence of what occurred with Erik Menendez from the time he was 1.5 years old, with respect to his state of mind. Evidence about how he would break out of his house and go across the street, how he had to eat his meat and string beans. So many things have been brought up before these juries about what he had to endure over all these years and what his state of mind was. Well, I think his state of mind is an issue, and all I want to do is ask him the question as to the screenplay that he and Craig Signorelli authored in January of 1988, whether that had any effect on his state of mind on the day that he killed his parents. And it's not going to be in detail. I'm not going to go over the facts of the story, but just bring out the fact that he had written a screenplay that involved a young man looking at a will and killing his parents, and asked him simply whether that had
And that's all you propose to do?
yes.
Is ask him that question and he'll say no and then you'll drop it? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes.
But we would object to him asking a question about whether he wrote a screenplay with a young man who kills his parents after looking at a will.
I mean, the young man he wrote it with killed his parents?
No, a screenplay about a young man who killed his parents after writing a will. The court may recall the 402 testimony of Mr.
I
Signorati.
do recall it. All right, the court has already ruled on this matter and can anticipate the nature of the answer, and it really is an effort by the prosecution to bring before the jury the contents of the screenplay by asking the question. And since the court has ruled that the screenplay itself has no relevance or whatever probative value it has is substantially outweighed by its potential prejudice and potential for undue consumption of time, it cannot be brought up by the prosecution. So by asking the question and at this stage would not be appropriate, and the court would and does again sustain the defense objection to use of that document. Obviously, as I said before, the relationship of Mr. Signorelli and Erik Menendez is an issue that can be developed, and to the extent that they worked on a screenplay together, the mother wrote or typed the screenplay. It apparently at some point was a product of the computer in the house, or somehow was generated by that. If that's true, can be developed during the examination, as well as the fact that the defendant was discussing another screenplay with Mr. Signorelli on November the 29th. Those are matters that occurred. The content of these screenplays don't have any bearing on this case as of what has been developed so far.
And with respect to that, it appears to me that anything that may have affected Erik Menendez's state of mind should be brought to bear in front of, or brought before the jury. The fact that he may deny that it affected him whatsoever in killing his own parents is really something that the jury should decide, and not be bound by his denial that had anything to do with it.
Well, but then you cause the screenplay itself to become an exhibit. By asking a question, his denying the answer, you don't bring before the jury the fact that there was a screenplay and it had these things, unless you ask him to affirm those things occurred, that there was a screenplay and it said these things. And then once you do that, then the entirety of the screenplay becomes an issue. And we've already been through that it is a lengthy document that was written in collaboration with someone else. It has all sorts of themes and stories and subplots that deal with all sorts of other matters totally extraneous to this case, and it would and could create an undue consumption of time by getting into all of that. You can't just limit it to 1 or 2 pages and say, that's all I want to ask, and then leave it at that.
Your Honor, with respect to the other murders that the hero in this screenplay commits, I'm sure the defense would not want to bring that out, and I would not intend to bring that out. I just would like to bring the court's attention that the defense brought in evidence just through the mouth of Erik Menendez that there were these magazines that were pornographic in content. Now, what that has to prove, if a story that this man has written is not relevant, I don't know how pornographic magazines would be relevant. Okay, that these juries should be apprised. They would be misled and evidence would be withheld from them if they weren't allowed to simply make the determination of whether or not he's being truthful as to the effect of the screenplay. And as the court indicated, the first 2 pages of the screenplay, actually the first page and a half, is what's relevant. I wouldn't propose to admit the entire screenplay. And I'm sure that the defense would not want the rest of the screenplay in. So it's just a matter of maybe a page and a half, and I would ask the question. I'm sure he's not going to deny that he wrote the screenplay, and in fact, the plot is the young man kills his parents after looking at the will.
Well, as we discussed and had testimony from Mr. Signorelli, this was written jointly by the two. And Mr. Signorelli indicated he didn't recall who had the initial idea of the son killing the parents, but it was written by them both together. And by circumstance, it was actually typed by the mother, the one who ultimately was killed by Erik Menendez. So to say this was somehow a reflection of the defendant's state of mind is rather far-fetched, wouldn't you say, that the mother was typing up a document that reflected the son's intent to kill her?
Your Honor, what I'm saying is that on August 20th, defendant Erik Menendez had a certain state of mind, and I simply want to ask him whether that screenplay had anything to do with that state of mind. Now, he's claiming that the almost 19 years of his entire life went into his state of mind that night, everything that happened to him. And I can't get out the fact that he has written the screenplay, which is relevant in this case, and it's directly, he killed his parents, the man in the screenplay.
Court mentioned a little while ago, which has to do with the fact that Erik Menendez, this refers, I assume, to the November 29th wire conversation with Mr. Signorelli. I sort of wanted to know what the limits were going to be, if any, placed on that with respect to cross-examining our client. I failed to see how the fact that Mr. Menendez is writing another screenplay, please, come on. Because I know it annoys the court. It annoys the court when I do it, and I'm sure the court is equal.
Well, I have to assume that it was annoying you. This is why you reacted the way you did.
Well, but the concern is I fail to see how the fact that Mr. Menendez is writing another draft of the screenplay, or what the details of that are, and I realize those are 2 different issues, would be in the case. The conversation during this dinner, I mean, it's about 15 pages of Mr. Menendez bringing Mr. Signorelli up to date on the changes made in that same screenplay. And the court has not previously allowed the content of any screenplay to be put before the juries, and we would argue that it still shouldn't be. And in fact, the fact that Mr. Menendez is working on a screenplay at that time is not relevant to the nature of his relationship with Mr. Signorelli.
Well, I don't agree with that at all. The defense position has been that the defendant was distraught, upset, depressed, all those things. And if you listen to that tape recording, you don't get that impression. You get the impression of somebody who is creating another screenplay, and his creative juices are flowing, and he's enthused about what he was writing about. So it's hard to equate that with the nature of his emotions that you've tried to depict here.
We're talking about November 20th.
I understand that.
And there's been no testimony about his state of mind on November 29th or points hence.
Well, you've certainly tried to give the impression to the jury that after the parents were killed, he was distraught, and that continued, and he didn't get any help from Dr. Oziel in that regard, and it just continued on. And that certainly is contradicted by his own words if anyone wanted to listen to that tape recording.
Well, first of all, it is not the fact that you can be enthusiastic about something when you're depressed. I mean, I don't know of any
expert who would say that's impossible or inconceivable.
I'm not saying it is or not, but that's just something for a trier of fact to
Well,
perhaps
I don't
evaluate.
believe that you just put on everything someone says because of their tone of voice, and therefore it's all relevant because it doesn't show depression when that's a lay opinion.
I haven't said that either. I just have said that the nature of the conversation is certainly something the trier of fact can be apprised of. The specifics of it, I'll have to wait and see what develops. I've said that the content of the screenplays aren't relevant. Anybody reading these documents would see that there are all sorts of fantastic, and when I say fantastic, I mean in the nature of fantasies and subplots and these things that would consume an undue amount of time if we got into it.
Well, my point, though, is getting into the entire discussion on November 29th about that plot also is an undue consumption of time. That's my concern, is whether or not the people are going to be able to bring out all 15 or 20 pages of discussion about Joe and so.
As I've said, the content, the plot itself is not admissible, but the nature of the conversation and the tone and that sort of thing would be. And other things that were mentioned during that conversation would be.
So you're saying anything mentioned during that conversation, even though the court had ruled, some of it wasn't previously, and that some of it you were holding in abeyance, you say everything in that conversation is now admissible?
I didn't follow what you just said.
Judge, we had gone through this conversation topically in early.
Yes, you had certain objections to certain things that people wanted to offer.
Right, and you had made certain rulings that certain things, either you deferred ruling or you ruled they were inadmissible.
As far as now, I have to wait and hear what the questions are. I didn't hear anything in that document or recall anything in that tape recording or the transcript of it that was prejudicial. These are things that we'll just have to wait for questions to be asked and answers to be given. I suppose we could go through it and preview every question so you know exactly what's going to be asked, but I don't think that's appropriate.
I'm only interested in topics. I don't need a preview of questions at all. What areas, for example, there was some mention by my client that he was wearing a pager. I don't know what the possible relevance of that could be.
All right. Again, these are not matters that require rulings before testimony. These are not so prejudicial in any regard that we have to have hearings about them. Just have a question asked, and if it's relevant, proper question, it'll be asked, and there'll be an answer.
Yeah, I have a question about the screenplays. In cross-examining the defense psychological experts, it appears that it might be appropriate to inquire about the screenplays. Would the court reconsider its ruling at that time?
If it has relevance to what they say or their opinions, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what, just because they didn't consider it doesn't mean they can't be questioned about it. I don't know what they're going to say, so I can't answer that in the abstract.
All I asked is if we could reconsider
Certainly.
it if appropriate.
Your Honor, it's also the matter, it's also the matter of the burglaries, I think. We don't know. Court had previously ruled that the content of the burglaries, the specifics, were not admissible. We have certainly not brought out any specifics about them. I'm sure Mr. Burrell would love to get into every detail.
I haven't ruled that the specifics were not admissible. You were able to arrive at a stipulation as to the facts of that both sides agreed to. And the issue is as to what will be brought out during cross-examination. I don't
believe you should be permitted to cross-examine about the specifics of these burglaries, but for the one fact Mr. Menendez testified to, which is that Mr. Signorelli was with him, because in order to prove up anything, he has to rely on extrinsic evidence and call in witnesses, and it's a mini trial of 2 other charges.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know that if your client admitted everything, there wouldn't be any need for any, whatever it is that is asked, or if there's no dispute about it, then there is no need to prove it.
We would object to what's being asked about the specific of these burglaries under 1101 theories, that it's being used at this point as bad character evidence, and it's not a similar crime, and they shouldn't be able to bring out the specifics for that purpose.
Well, it was never offered for that purpose, to show bad character or to show the similarity to this crime. There was never the theory that it was
Well,
being used
the
for.
theory was that the theory, I believe, was best enunciated by the court,
which was that it somehow had relevance because it's what led them to Dr. Oziel.
Well, that was one facet of it, and it also reflected the relationship and the reaction of the father and perhaps the mother to the situation.
But there's no
Those were
showing,
things that were discussed earlier.
there's no showing that the parents, there's been no evidence that the parents were aware of the facts and circumstance. There's no evidence of their reaction except to refer their sons to Dr. Oziel. So the facts and details of the burglaries don't bear on and would be
Well, let
wild.
me ask, before we get carried away on this, what is it that you wanted to do, Mr. Creel?
With respect to the burglaries, it has relevance in more than just the fact that after the burglaries, the parents required that both brothers see a psychologist. In addition, as the court indicated at page 7640, the way the burglaries were committed and what the defendants told parents about the burglaries and how they were committed, and all of that could very well relate to how the parents reacted to it. Now, as the stipulation read, the father accompanied Erik Menendez to the Malibu Sheriff's Station on September 16, 1988, and that's when most of the property was turned over. Now, it further states that Jose Menendez made full restitution to the Lists and the Ginsburgs for the property not returned to them. So if counsel is claiming that Mr. Menendez didn't know anything about the burglaries, that is a bald-faced lie. That the stipulation that was entered into belies that that fact or her statement, her contention. What I believe is, as defendant Erik Menendez has testified, he said that his father in September of 1988 told him with respect to the inheritance that he was thinking about disinheriting him. That occurred in September of 1988. And in fact, in September of 1988, Mr. Menendez is seen at the Malibu Sheriff's Station with Erik Menendez and Mr. Menendez's attorney turning over the property taken in these burglaries.
Right, that is all material that can be developed as to the specifics of, what window did you go in and how many trips did it take to remove all the property and what exactly did you do with all the property. All those things are not really relevant on those issues that you're talking about. What the parents, first of all, what you read, my comment on page 7640 was a question, not a statement by the court. And it was in reference to what had been said by counsel to the court and my reaction to it. And I said, I don't know what the evidence would be or how it would be presented. And certainly the parents' reaction to the information and how they and what they did, and the description of, as you've recounted it, going to the police station and things of that sort are all part of the evidence that can be introduced. Counsel have gone into great depth and detail of all the reactions of the parents to all sorts of things, and certainly this is a relevant area. And dealing with the time frame that you indicate regarding disinheritance or disowning and everything else that has been described here, as well as the going to Dr. Oziel. All those things can be developed. These specific details, exactly what happened, don't really have to be developed. And I don't think you intend to do that, do you, in your examination?
With respect to the depth of the detail, I had intended to get into the fact that they cut and it has cut away a screen and slid open the window that entered the residence. As the stipulation indicates, there was a combination safe, VCR, China silverware, Southwest machine, IBM computers, and jewelry that was taken from within. In addition to that, Your Honor, there is a statement made by Erik Menendez in which he states that after he entered into the safe of Mr. and Mrs. List and took money and jewelry, with part of that money, he bought implements to help him with the second burglary, that of the Ginsburgs. So I think that all has to do with Erik Menendez's, what he did with respect to these burglaries and how the parents reacted to the gravity, the magnitude of the thefts in requiring that he go to see a psychologist and actually turning him in and returning the property. And in fact, Mr. Menendez had to make restitution for the money that was spent by the brothers and not returned to the victims, and some property that was never returned to the victims. So the parents were well aware of the magnitude of these crimes committed by these brothers, and took steps to try to help the brothers with respect to getting them psychological assistance and making them, at least Erik Menendez, take responsibility for his crime.
Your Honor, that's precisely what I thought Mr. Kuriyama would want to do, which of course would render the fact we have stipulation totally useless. We don't have any objection to asking him how his parents reacted to the burglaries, or, the fact that his father made restitution, or any of those things. But we do object because there's no way to prove, in fact, my knowledge is that the parents did not know the specific details, and I submit to the court that Mr. Kuriyama is not interested in proving that money was used from the list safe to buy tools for the Ginsburg burglary for any purpose relating to the parents and their knowledge, but in order to be able to argue that Erik and Lyle Menendez planned crimes, a pure 1101 purpose. And so our objection would be to the very thing the court was talking about, cutting open windows and trips up and back, and actually planning any kind of criminal activity, whereas we don't object to asking them, how did your parents deal with this, or how did your parents react? Or,
Well, I have a feeling you probably want to make good use of that reaction in some way.
but if I wanted to
But-
make good use of it, I would have brought it out myself.
Well,
I'm just prepared to live with it, okay?
Let me say this, that the specific details of what happened as far as how entry was made and things of that sort aren't really probative of anything as far as the reason why this evidence is being introduced. There has been reference to the perfect crime and the father's criticism of the defendants for the way they behaved, and the criticism of them for not doing a better job, if that indeed occurred, or if the father indeed made those statements. Things of that nature can be developed, what he told his father and what his father said to him, things of that sort. And I don't know if the father was present during the time he spoke with the sheriff or not. That's not something that's been made known to me. But certainly the fact of the burglary and what was said to the parents, father's activities in reaction to it, going to the police station with the defendant, making restitution, things of that nature that are within the defendant's knowledge are certainly areas of inquiry. But the specific details of the crime are not. The fact that the defendant implicated his brother in the crimes would be relevant if he did. I'm talking about to his father, not to others, to the police. All right, anything else now before we proceed? All right, let's get the jury
Any
out.
of the areas that you had told Mr. Kuriyama he has to notice on first? I haven't heard anything else.
All right, let's get the jury out, please. And before we do that, we'll get the defendant, Lyle Menendez, remove him from the courtroom.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right, the blue jury is back in the courtroom, and now cross-examination before that jury only.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, you have testified that your father spoke with you about disinheriting you in September of 1988, correct?
He did disinherit me. That's pretty cool. Yes.
In fact, sir, he did not disinherit you. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Now, in September of 1988, did something occur that precipitated your father discussing with you that he was going to disinherit you?
He never told me why he was disinheriting me.
Do you recall something occurring during the month of September 1988 that gave you the idea that it was the reason why your father wanted to disinherit you?
I didn't know why he wanted to disinherit me, but something did occur in September of 1988.
Now, in July of 1988, you and your brother committed burglaries, correct?
Craig Signorelli, my brother, and I.
Now, there were two houses involved, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The home of Mr. and Mrs. John List
Yes, sir.
and the home of Mr. and Mrs. Michael Ginsburg.
Yes.
Now, with respect to Mr. and Mrs. John List, are you saying that your brother was there?
No.
And according to the stipulation that was entered into earlier in the case, it reads as follows. Between July 1st, 1988 and July 10th, 1988, Erik Menendez and a friend were at the home of another friend, John List Jr., whose parents were away on vacation. While searching for the keys to a van, Erik and his friend found a piece of paper bearing the combination to the List family safe. After the safe was opened, Erik removed money and property. Correct?
Corrected. That's what the stipulation says? Yes.
Now, you're saying that the friend that was with you was Craig Signorelli with respect to the List house, correct?
Yes, he was.
You're the one that entered the safe and took out money and jewelry, correct?
Objection, I thought we just had a ruling on this.
Overruled.
Yes, I did it with Craig.
You're the one that went into the safe, not Craig Signorelli. You went into the safe and removed money and jewelry, correct?
Actually, argumentative, it's not what it's saying.
Overruled.
No, sir. If I did it alone, then Craig wouldn't have done it with me. He was with me when we were looking for the keys, as it says in there, and then we found the safe.
Mr. Menendez, who entered the safe?
Craig and I.
Were you bumping into each other as you entered it?
It's not a walk-in safe, sir.
Right, it's a floor safe, correct?
Yes.
Who entered the safe?
Nobody entered the safe.
Did
We
you-
stood outside of it. Sir.
Did you remove something from that safe?
Yes.
And on July 14th, 1988, you and your brother entered the Calabasas residence of Michael Ginsburg, correct?
Yes.
And you removed a combination safe and its contents from a closet,
Yes.
a VCR.
I don't remember everything that was removed. But if it's in there, it was removed.
This is part of the stipulation. China
I'm
silverware.
going to object to reading the stipulation. I think it's confusing the words. And I would
Why
object.
don't you rephrase the question so it's not confusing?
Do you remember removing with your brother from this house in this residential burglary that you and your brother committed a combination safe?
Yes.
Your Honor, asked and answered.
You remember removing a VCR?
Not specifically.
China
Yes.
silverware,
Yes.
a Solo Flex machine,
Yes.
an IBM computer,
Not specifically.
jewelry.
Yes.
Did you take money in that one as well?
Objection is, it's in the stipulation, Your Honor. It's limited.
No.
Now, you and your brother were not caught on that, and you were actually turned in on September 16th, some over 2 months after you had committed these crimes, correct?
Objection
try-
found and as soon as facts not contended.
Overruled.
I turned myself in on September 18th,
September 16th?
16th.
Now, when you say you turned yourself in, your father was with you, correct?
My father and an attorney.
And your father accompanied you to the Malibu Sheriff's Station, correct?
Yes, we came with a U-Haul truck.
And he assisted in taking the property that you had stolen and turning it over to the sheriffs, correct?
Yes, sir.
Your father also had to make restitution to the victims, Mr. and Mrs. List and the Ginsburg, for property that was not returned, correct?
I was not aware of that, but I learned that later. It's in the stipulation.
What is it that was not returned that you remember?
Objection, Your Honor. Overruled.
I don't remember what was not returned. I thought everything was returned. We brought it in a big U-Haul truck, and my father did not discuss with me. I know he had to pay some cash. I didn't know why. He didn't discuss with me those things.
Could it have been that you spent some of the cash that you took out of the List safe?
No, I don't believe I did.
You didn't spend any of that cash? Is that your testimony?
My parents found it in my, they found, I don't remember how much money in a safe in my house,
Where was that safe?
in my closet.
How long after you had committed these crimes did they find this money in your safe?
Brenna, I'm going to object to the use of the word crimes. These were handled as juvenile court matters.
Soon after.
How soon after?
I don't remember.
At some point, you understood that your parents found some money in your safe, and did they ask you where you got the money?
Yes,
And what did you tell them?
I told them.
Told them what?
I told them that my brother, Craig, and I had gotten this from 2 houses.
Now, Craig was with you with regard to the List house, correct?
Yes,
You're the one that went into the safe, correct? Removed items from the safe.
it was Craig and I were right there. I did as well, yes.
And you and your brother entered into the Ginsburg residence, correct?
Yes.
Now, did you describe for your father exactly what you did in those two, the grand theft from the List and the residential burglary of the Ginsburgs?
No, I didn't describe it for him at all. I told him exactly where everything was, though.
Did you describe for him or relate to him anything that you had done with respect to those two break-ins?
I told him what we took and drove him to where we had it.
Now, when did this occur as far as you telling your parents what you had done?
As far as me telling them, excuse me, I didn't hear.
What you had done?
I believe in August.
And it was on September 16th, 1988, that your father accompanied you to the Malibu Sheriff Station?
Yeah, exactly.
And I believe you told Dr. Oziel that you resented your father criticizing you and your brother for the way that you had done the burglaries?
Objection on this stage, Dr. Nichols' testimony.
No,
Did you, in fact, tell Dr. Oziel that your father had criticized you and your brother for the way you did those burglaries?
no, I didn't. What I told Dr. Oziel was that Dad told us that we were too stupid. We did them stupidly and that we got caught. And that if we were going to do something, we should do it right.
Did that go into your state of mind as to how you would commit the murder of your parents?
No,
That had nothing to do with it?
I don't, no, not at all.
Do you remember talking to Dr. Oziel on October 31st and November 2nd and relating things that went into the mix of why you wanted to kill your parents?
Yes, but that's not when that was related.
Are you saying that you didn't talk about the residential burglaries in the October 31st or the November 2nd sessions?
Oh, we did, just not that statement.
In fact, you have indicated that your father discussed with you disinheriting you in September of 1988. Did the burglaries that you committed have anything to do with your father discussing with you the disinheritance?
My father did not discuss things with me. He told me I was disinherited. The burglaries play into it. He told me that I did them stupidly. I thought that it might have something to do with it, but he wouldn't have just disinherited me over a burglary issue. He was pretty angry with me throughout that summer, mostly because I was ranked 70 in tennis, and he thought I was a pretty big failure.
So it wasn't the fact that you did residential burglaries that made him upset and want to disinherit you. It was because you were ranked 70th in tennis?
The 70th was more important to him from what I thought. I'm sure he was upset about the burglaries. There's no question about it. But I don't think that was the main that may have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but I don't know exactly what played into it.
He was upset that you had committed these crimes, correct?
He was upset that, yeah, I would say he was also upset that we did it. He was upset that we did it poorly.
Now, did your mother and father, after you did the burglaries, did they see to it that you got some psychological assistance?
Your Honor, I think that begs the question. Calls for speculation.
We went to see Dr. Oziel because my attorney told me that in order to get the best possible verdict from the juvenile court that I went to, going to an attorney would play a large role in the attorney's evaluation of me or something along those lines.
Going to who? You said going to an attorney.
No, I'm sorry. Going to see Dr. Oziel or a therapist would be important to the court.
Do you recall, sir, that you had an interview with Detective Zoller on September 17th, 1989 in Cranberry, New Jersey? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Page 32, counsel. Do you remember telling Detective Zoller that my parents basically made us get one after the Calabasas thing, referring to Dr. Oziel?
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
And you stated on that same date, same page, counsel 32, that Dr. Oziel is a very good friend of yours, that he spent a lot of time with you, with us basically after the killings, correct?
Yes.
So Dr. Oziel, as of September 17th, was a very good friend of yours, wasn't he?
I viewed him as a friend of mine. There's no question about that.
And now that the courts have authorized him to testify in this case, he's not such a good friend of yours anymore, is he?
Objection, Your Honor, that's argument.
Sustained.
Now, do you recall testifying in front of the jury, sir, that your brother was a very good friend of yours, that he protected you throughout your life? Remember all of that?
Yes,
And that you love your brother?
I love him very much.
Do you remember saying, sir, on November 29th, 1989, that
Your
your
Honor, for this, I would like a page cite and argument.
page B, 16 and 17,
Okay, your version or ours? Second opportunity, Your Honor.
Sure.
I'd like to take this.
All right, B16.
and 17, Your Honor. It's a 33.
And where are you starting?
Basically, I could paraphrase it or I could read it directly,
Where are you starting from?
where it says,
No, Your Honor, I would rather be.
Well, just tell me where it is so I can look at
okay, basically,
it. Idea.
it starts at, what about the police?
One moment.
You know, with respect to B17, it's in the middle of the page, where it starts off, man.
All right, did counsel want to discuss this?
Yes, thank you.
You make it clear.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, do you recall having a conversation with Craig Signorelli on November 29th, 1989?
Yes.
At Gladstone's restaurant?
No, but I'm sure that's right.
Do you remember in the conversation with respect to your brother, you said, man, I wouldn't be surprised if someone.
I'm going to object to reading it.
Overruled. Overruled.
Do you recall, Mr. Menendez, stating on that day, man, I wouldn't surprise if someone came out, if he actually did do it and someone came out and said he did it. Do you remember making that statement about your brother?
No, I don't. If
And
you
then
could
you-
show it to me, I would.
Then you stated the bravest human being in this entire world.
Objection, Your Honor, to reading that.
Overruled. Remember that?
Not really,
Why
sir.
don't you show it to him?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let him get it in context.
May I approach?
Yes.
Okay.
Pages B16 and 17 of 33
Why are you showing the 16?
to give them the context.
Wait, I haven't read it. Okay, yeah, I understand.
Mr. Menendez, do you recall having a conversation with Mr. Signorelli in which you're discussing you and your brother being suspects in the case?
That's not exactly how it went about, but yes.
And that you stated that if somebody knew that your brother was involved in the killing, he would have to be the bravest human being in this entire world to come forward with that information?
No, that's not at all what I said.
What did you mean by that? That, man, I wouldn't surprise if someone came out, if he actually did do it, meaning your brother, because you're referring to your brother, and someone came out and said he did it, you said the bravest human being in this entire world.
You're completely misreading it out of context. If you'd like me, I'd read it.
What did you mean by that?
I don't remember what I meant by it, but that's not what I said.
Is this, are you saying this transcript is inaccurate?
What I'm saying is the transcript is missing large portions because apparently the tape wasn't very good. I didn't know I was being tape recorded. And so there's portions in that tape which I don't know what I'm saying. In other words, I only got glimpses of my sentences. But in terms of the bravest human being in the entire world, I'm not quite sure what I meant by that. But I don't think I was referring to someone coming out and saying that my brother did it.
Now, the sentence just previous to that was, if someone came out, if he actually did do it and someone came out and said he did it, you said the bravest human being in this entire world.
It's not reading what Mr.
Yeah.
Signorelli.
Why don't you inject the comment by Mr. Signorelli so we have it in context here.
Okay. You stated, man, I wouldn't surprise if someone came out, if he actually did do it and someone came out and said he did it, and Craig Signorelli said, yeah, then they'd be going, yeah. And then you stated the bravest human being in this entire world, and Craig Signorelli said, I remember Princeton. And you said the bravest human being in this entire world. What did you mean by that?
I don't know if I can see it again. I can tell you hopefully what I meant by it, but I'm not quite sure. I wasn't referring to my brother, I don't think, in terms of someone coming out and saying he did it, and therefore that person would be the bravest human being in the entire world. I think what your interpretation is of it.
Okay, let me read a couple of sentences above that then. I'm not scared of my brother at all if I died, but, and Craig says, yeah. And you say, you have nothing to fear about him. He won't touch you. And Craig says, I'm just worried about him. I don't know. He was referring to your brother, wasn't he?
Yeah, the whole conversation was about Craig Signorelli trying to get me to admit that I killed my parents because he was wearing a wiretap and the police were in a van outside. And I was telling him that I didn't do it because I had confessed to him before, and I had heard up in Santa Barbara that he was going around saying I did it. So in this conversation, I was trying to convince him in any way possible that I didn't do it. And at that point, he switched, well, maybe your brother did it. And that's, I think, the point where you're at.
So in fact, you had told Craig Signorelli, your best friend, that you had done it.
Well, yes.
And you had heard before that he had been telling people up in Santa Barbara?
Yeah, a friend of mine, Jade, told me that that's where the rumors were up in Santa Barbara. And of course, I knew they were true.
And when you made the comment to Craig Signorelli on that day, you asked about the police. You said, what about the police? And Craig Signorelli said, I don't know about the police. And you said, talk to them? And he said, I have talked to them. And you said, what'd you tell them? And he said, I still think they think I'm a suspect. And you stated, surely you would have never told them anything that I told you like that, because I mean, that's, and then Craig Signorelli stated, yeah, that's what I'll tell them. And then you stated, I was, and Craig says, hi, Erik. Erik killed his parents. Yeah. And then you stated, because I could use this. They don't know who suspect me. They suspect my brother. Do you remember that?
No, if you show it to me, I can confirm it.
I'm going to approach again now.
Yes, this is Craig Signorelli telling me that the police still think he's a suspect. And then me asking him, you didn't, basically saying that you wouldn't have told people up in Santa Barbara what I told you. And him saying, of course not, I wouldn't have done that. And me saying that, I don't know, there's too many deletions. I don't know what I'm referring to here. And then I said they suspect my brother because I knew that the detectives all did.
You stated that they don't know who committed the crime, correct?
There's a deletion. That could be what it was.
They don't suspect you, but they suspect your brother. Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
And then later on, you talked about a person having to be the bravest human being in this entire world if they came forward, if your brother actually did do it, and someone came out and said he did it.
No, that's not what it says.
Look back to page
no longer.
17 of 33, sir, where it's highlighted in orange.
Yes.
What do you mean, sir, by I wouldn't be surprised if someone came out, if he actually did do it, and someone came out and said he did it, the bravest human being in this entire world? What did you mean by that?
Before I say the bravest human being in the entire world, Craig Signorelli says, yeah, then they'd be going, yeah. And then I say the bravest human being in the entire world. And then Craig says, I remember Princeton. And apparently I'm still in my thought. And I say the bravest human being in this entire world. And Craig says, yeah, that was deletion. I say, And then Craig says, do you think it's the mob? I don't believe I'm referring to someone coming out and saying my brother did it, and therefore that person would be the bravest human being in the entire world. But maybe I was. I mean, I don't remember the context of why that was said because there's too much missing.
Now, there doesn't appear to be anything missing in that this set of questions and answers, correct? There's no
Before
asterisks
and after.
from here to here where it says, if he actually did do it and someone came out and said he did it, the bravest human being in this entire world. There's nothing in between. There's nothing that's left out, correct?
Before that, I say I wouldn't be surprised if someone came out, and basically I'm saying if someone came out and said he did it. So I don't know why I'm I'm explaining to you, I would also say that person would be the bravest human being in the entire world if I wouldn't be surprised if someone did come out and do it.
You stated if someone came out, if someone,
I'm gonna object to this.
Sustained, we've been through this.
now, could that have been, this is November 29th, 1989. Could that have been in reference to the threats made by your brother and you to Dr. Oziel?
I'm gonna object to the form of the question. There's been no testimony that Mr. Menendez ever threatened Dr. Oziel.
I never threatened Dr. Oziel. I did the opposite. I'm the one that went to him in the first place.
Because he was a good, very good friend of yours, correct?
Apparently I said that on the 17th. I did think he was a nice guy, yes.
Now, when you made the statement about the person coming forward being the bravest human being in this entire world, were you referring to Dr. Oziel?
Dr. Oziel coming forward?
Yes.
No, I wasn't referring to Dr. Oziel coming forward.
Were you telling Craig Signorelli, who you have said that you told what you and your brother had done, were you telling Craig Signorelli, you better not say anything because Lyle will get you?
No, but I was telling Signorelli throughout that conversation that, basically that I wish that he would not tell anyone, and he's trying to convince me that the police still think he's a suspect, so he couldn't have told anyone. I didn't know he was wiretapped.
You didn't
But-
know it at the time.
No, I didn't.
So what you said on that date was not anything that you had made up. You were actually saying what you meant on that day or what you were feeling.
Yes.
And you had said that even though you had confessed to Craig Signorelli, you had heard that he had related that fact to other people in Santa Barbara, so you wanted to mislead him in this conversation.
Completely. I wanted to try to do it in the best way possible, that I didn't do it and that Lyle didn't do it, and that to try to convince him of that, because I had heard that he was going around telling people and I suspected he went to the police.
So you wanted to confuse Craig Signorelli?
No, I wanted to try to convince him that I didn't do it.
So you were lying on November 29th
Yes.
about your involvement in the killings of your parents.
Yeah, we were lying back and forth to each other, and it kept going on.
Now, you stated that you didn't want to be an actor. Is that right?
Well, I enjoyed acting, and I had thought about it, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do after my parents died.
And on November 29th, you spoke to Craig Signorelli, and you told him that you wanted to make money in acting, correct?
Could you, I may very well have, if I could just see where I said it.
Okay. Was that your state of mind that you wanted to become an actor?
No, I was, if I remember correctly, and I haven't seen it, I was telling Craig that I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a tennis player. I wanted to go into real estate. I wanted to set up a homeless charity. I wanted to do all sorts of things, and that I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
With respect to the real estate, there's been testimony in front of this jury that the purchase agreement for this penthouse suite in Marina Del Rey and the Marina City Towers for $990,000. Remember, you had indicated that you had made a deposit of $29,700,
Yes.
and that was simply a loan.
Yes, it was.
Now, you yourself wanted to buy property, correct?
Yes.
And on September 17th, you had told Detective Zoller that you intended to buy some property in the Marina Del Rey area
I think I told him that I wanted to move to Marina Del Rey.
and buy a house, correct?
Yes.
and that this property, this $990,000 penthouse was Lyle's idea, and it was supposed to be his house?
Well, if I remember the apartment correctly, it really had only one feasible room. I couldn't live there with Lyle, and I had no intention of living in the same apartment with Lyle anyway.
So instead of getting that $990,000 penthouse, you put an offer on a $1.5 million house in Marina Del Rey, correct?
Objection,
No.
Your Honor, asked to approach.
Mr. Menendez, do you recall your testimony that the day that you came back after the memorial service in New Jersey was the day that the computer people were there and that Casey Whalen picked you up from the airport?
I know that Casey Whalen picked me up from the airport. It's my best recollection that it was on September 1st, mostly because Casey, his mother, and his sister remember it was that day.
Okay, do you remember, Casey Whalen testified and he said that he picked you up from the airport on September 1st, 1989, correct?
Yes.
And that he took you back to the Beverly Hills house
Yes.
and that he left your luggage in his car.
I don't remember if he testified to that.
Yeah, your suitcases were in the car and you went inside the house for a period of time.
Yes.
And that when you were upstairs checking on your answer machine, you were called downstairs and that's when you saw this computer man.
Yes, that's what he testified to.
And he said that he didn't remember a woman with him. With the computer man.
To this accumulation and recitation of other witnesses' testimony.
Ask another question, please.
Do you remember discussing this with Casey Whalen, the fact that there was this computer person at the house on the day that you came back from the East Coast?
I never discussed it with Casey.
And he had stated in his testimony, Casey Whalen, that Craig Signorelli was not there on that day.
Objection, Your Honor, to accumulating and restating other witnesses' testimony.
Sustain.
Is it your memory, sir, that when Casey Whalen came in and testified, he was accurate as to what he did on the day that he brought you home from the airport?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that as calling for the opinion for each of the other witnesses. I would ask this way.
Objection overruled as to that question.
What Casey remembers and his sister and his mother remember is what they remember. My memory is more vague than theirs.
Okay, you said that you remember, I believe when your attorney asked you, you said that you remember specifically that the day you came back is the day that the computer man was at your house.
That's my best memory. That is my best memory, but I wasn't as sure about it until I heard that Casey, his mother, and his sister confirmed that that is the day.
Well, could it have been the next day that the computer man came?
It is possible.
Okay, and so when Casey Whalen said that he didn't know where you were the next day, that he just took you and brought you home and took you to your car that day, could that be possible?
I don't know if he testified to that. I know he testified that the next day, if I came in on a Friday, then the next day he did drive me back to my house. If I came in on a Thursday, then it was the Friday that he took me back to my house. But those days went by so quick for me. I don't remember as much as I would like to.
Now, when you came back from the East Coast, normally before your parents were killed by you and your brother, would you put your plane tickets on their American Express card?
Before my parents died, would I do it?
Right. Would you have a record on their American Express card regarding plane flights that you took?
I don't know. They did everything. I don't know how they bought tickets or didn't, or by whom. Or
Once your parents were killed, did you get yourself a credit card or anything of that sort?
yeah, my Aunt Martha gave me a credit card.
Now, do you recall purchasing a ticket to come back from New Jersey with a credit card?
I don't recall. I know that most of my tickets that I bought went through my Aunt Terry, who was a travel agent. But very well could have. I just don't have a good memory of it.
Okay, do you remember where you were? Well, which airport did you fly out of to come back to Los Angeles from the East Coast?
My best recollection is that I flew out of Newark.
From where?
Newark.
Newark Airport?
Yeah.
Do you remember going to that airport and making the purchase? Now, do you have any idea how it could be ascertained where you, what day you flew on?
Your Honor, I can object to the form of the question.
Sustained.
Do you have any recollection of that flight back from New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey?
I have a good recollection of meeting Casey at the baggage claim, but I've tried really hard to remember the exact day I flew back, where it was from, and the actual flight, because I know it's important, but I haven't been able to do it.
Do you remember how you got to the airport in New Jersey?
I don't. I know there's records indicating all sorts of things, but I don't know how I got there.
Now, was Casey Whalen accurate when he said that he picked you up from the airport in the baggage claim,
Yes, that he did.
and that he brought you home,
Yes, he did.
and that you needed to pick up some things,
Yes, I did.
and you went into the house and you went into your room and you checked on your messages?
Your Honor, is the question, is Casey accurate, or is the question what did the witness do? Because we'd objected.
Sustained. Why don't you rephrase the
Okay.
question?
Is that what happened so far, that you went up to get your messages and Casey was in your room with you?
That could be accurate.
And that then you went to Casey's, actually a computer person came, correct?
I know a computer person came at one point,
Yeah.
and I remember them vaguely.
And it was the day that Casey had picked you up from the airport.
That I cannot be sure of.
Now, you heard testimony from Casey Whalen that it couldn't have been Craig Signorelli there because he had taken you from the airport, correct?
No, I believe what he was saying is that it couldn't have been Craig Signorelli there because he was there.
Right, and that was the day that he picked you up from the airport, he testified.
Yeah, I think that's what he testified.
In your recollection on examination by your counsel was that you recall specifically that the computer person came on the day that you came back from the East Coast. So that supports what Casey Whalen said. Is that correct?
Is that what I said on?
Object to the form of the question.
It's compound.
Okay.
Sustained.
Mr. Menendez, do you remember testifying that when your attorney asked you if you have a specific recollection of when the computer man came, you said yes. Remember that?
Yeah, I know he came on a Friday.
And you remember that was the day that you came back from the East Coast.
I believe that was the day, but that's been severely reinforced by his mother, his sister, and him saying that they thought that was the day. I cannot be sure.
And in fact, when they testified to that, they said that later that evening, you all went to a Mexican restaurant, correct?
I believe they testified to that.
And that was the first day that you had arrived back from New Jersey.
Your Honor, I'm not clear again if the question is what the witnesses said or.
All right, let's phrase it as a question, and
Is it-
let's go with an intelligible question, please.
Is that your recollection, sir, that the day that you came back from New Jersey is the day that this computer man came?
That would be, I couldn't say for certain.
Would it be your recollection that it was some other day that the computer man came?
That, I mean, the day that I got back,
Right.
that could be. I remember it more the other way than that way, but I just can't be, I can't tell you 100% on this.
When Casey Whalen may be wrong then about when he was there. Is that right?
Calling for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, you heard Craig Signorelli say that he was there when the computer man came, correct?
Yes, that's what he said.
And that he remembered the pregnant wife?
That's what he said, yes.
And that he recalled what occurred during the time when Mr. and Mrs. Heyman were there.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this again. This is communicating and stating evidence.
Sustained.
Do you recall, sir, that the Heymans came in and they identified Craig Signorelli as a person that was with you?
Same objection, Your Honor. Other witnesses testify.
Sustained.
Is it your testimony that it was Casey Whalen that was with you that day rather than Craig Signorelli?
Yes, I believe that's what everyone believes.
Excuse me, I believe that's what.
Everyone believes. That's what I believe too.
And when you say everyone, that doesn't include Mr. and Mrs. Heyman, and it doesn't include Craig Signorelli either. does it?
No, I believe that Mrs. or Mrs. Heyman described a man that was stockier than I was, with sandy hair and light eyes. And Craig Signorelli has black hair, black eyes, and is thinner than I am, whereas Casey has sandyish hair, blue eyes, and is a football player. And that's why I believe they're mistaken about
So when they came in to testify, they were wrong
wrong about,
Craig Signorelli being there that day.
yes, Casey was there.
And Casey says he was there because he knows he brought you home from the airport that day.
I'm going to object to this again, Your Honor. Why
Sustained.
Casey was
Sustained.
there.
Objection sustained.
You recall on the day after you got back from the airport or from the East Coast that you were brought back to your house in Beverly Hills, correct, to pick up your car?
Yes.
And you testified earlier that you would spend time at the Beverly Hills house during the day because you were just drawn back to the house.
My recollection is coming back to me that I think my grandmother was there during those later times, and that's why I went back to the house. But I did go back to the Beverly Hills house. I know that after the airport.
Did your grandmother beat you back from the memorial service on the East Coast?
No, she didn't.
Okay, so when you came back, was anyone there at the Beverly Hills house?
The security guards.
Okay, and you had gotten a note that your brother had been there earlier.
Either that day or the other day, the day before.
It may have been the very day that you came back.
It may have been.
And do you remember Casey Whalen actually being there throughout the time that this computer man was there?
Yeah, my best memory is that Casey was there. I only remember bits and pieces of what happened when the computer person was there.
Okay, so the first day you were with Casey. Now, the second day that you were back in Los Angeles, do you recall anything about that day?
No,
Besides going to pick up your car in Beverly Hills?
I really don't even recall much about the day that I flew in, other than the fact that I flew in.
And that Casey Whalen picked you up?
Yeah, I know he picked me up at the airport because I have a definite memory of that, but I don't remember much about most of those days.
You do remember going out to dinner on the first day that you were there with Mr. Casey Whalen, his sister, and his mother?
I don't have a great memory of that, no.
You have a moment, Sean? Mr. Menendez, do you recall just prior to flying back to the East Coast where you were?
No, I don't.
You know, I have some U.S. Air records. They have the records comprised of
Your Honor,
2
may we
pages.
approach?
We can mark the exhibit as 292. Yes, you may approach.
Menendez, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 292. and ask you if that refreshes your recollection as to when you came back to Los Angeles from the East Coast.
You could help me.
Well, Your Honor, I'm going to object to being held if it doesn't refresh his recollection by looking at it.
Overall, he's just pointing to a particular portion of the document.
Does this mean that I flew back on that day?
Mr. Menendez, doesn't that indicate that you flew back to Los Angeles on August 31st, 1989?
No, I'm going to object to the question. It doesn't say anything about who flew anywhere.
Overall.
At 12:15, it says I flew at 12:15.
Yes, New York time.
That doesn't go along with my memory, only because if you fly at 12:15, you get back to California close to 3:15, 4 o'clock, and I'm quite sure I was back by 2.
Now, isn't it a 3-hour difference between here and New York?
Yeah, I think it's a 6-hour flight and a 3-hour difference.
So Casey Whalen picked you up on August 31st, correct? That was not the day that the Haymans came to your house.
Well, I'd like to say this with the ticket, and it may be the ticket, but my memory is that I was back in Los Angeles somewhere between 12 and 2 o'clock, like Casey remembers. And if I flew on this ticket, assuming the plane left on time, I could not have gotten to the baggage before 4. And that doesn't go with my memory, but this may be the
I'm
ticket.
going to object, Your Honor. The question was whether it refreshed his recollection.
Overall, the answer will stand.
Mr. Menendez, you flew out of LaGuardia Airport, correct?
My recollection is that I flew out of Newark.
And isn't it true that you were with Mark Heffernan at the U.S. Open in New York on the night before you flew back to Los Angeles?
I don't know. I knew I was with Mark Heffernan in New York at a hotel, which I stayed over because I remember seeing a match at the U.S. Open, and I met Mark there.
And Mark
But-
Heffernan's wife was with you at that hotel, correct?
Yeah, we all slept in the same room. There
In
were 2
fact,
beds.
you had a bodyguard with you, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And the bodyguard took you to the airport the next morning on August 31st, correct?
Yeah, I know there are records of that, of a limo with him going to LaGuardia, but I know Detective Zoller on the 17th thought I left on the 1st with a ticket under the name of Eric Tam. And I have another record of a limousine picking me up on September 1st.
Now, Mr. Menendez,
So the records are so jumbled that I wish I could tell you for sure, but I may very well have left on the 31st is what I'm saying. I just don't remember.
and isn't it true that the security guard that was with you was a New York police officer?
Yes, he was.
And he took you to LaGuardia. It wasn't New Jersey. It wasn't Newark as you had testified that you flew out of. Isn't that correct?
Rephrase the question.
You testified, sir, that you flew out of Newark, correct?
That's my best recollection that I flew out of Newark.
And you recall being taken after the U.S. Open and after seeing your coach, Mark Heffernan, in New York, you indicated right now that the bodyguard took you to LaGuardia Airport, correct?
After the U.S. Open, I couldn't have gone to the U.S. Open that morning if the plane left at 12:15. But I know there's the record of that, and that's why I believe that I may have left on the 31st, and I can't be sure. But I simply don't remember. I believe he says he took me to a Delta flight too, and this is U.S. Air.
Now, who said they took you to a Delta flight?
I thought that's what the records indicated, that the car went to the Delta terminal. If I knew for sure, I'd tell you. I don't. And it may have been the 31st, it may have been the 1st. I don't.
If you had arrived in Los Angeles on August 31st and Casey Whalen saw a computer person there, not remembering a pregnant wife, did you have a computer person there on the 31st of August?
No, definitely not.
But you spoke, according to Mrs. Whalen, Mrs. Cohen, you spoke about the erasure of a computer the day you came in to Los Angeles, correct?
Yes, I believe that's what they said. We did speak about it.
Now-
After I got the note from Lyle, And after the Haymans were there, and the Heyman said the computer was wiped, I knew what Lyle had done.
But the testimony was that you were talking about the erasure of the computer on the day you came back from the East Coast, the day that Casey Whalen picked you up, correct?
The testimony was that we were talking about the computer on a Friday night because Katie said that she knew she was working that night, and that's how she could pinpoint it to Friday, which was September 1st.
The testimony was that Casey Whalen said that you had your suitcases in his car. You simply went upstairs, you got your messages off of your answer machine, and when you came downstairs, the computer man was there, and he didn't remember any pregnant wife with him. Isn't that correct, sir?
Sustained. Sustained. It's
Now,
argumentative.
when you said, and Casey Whalen said that Craig Signorelli could not have been there that day because it was Casey Whalen who picked you up from the airport, that's inaccurate, isn't it? Because it happened the next day.
That's, no. Go ahead.
Be a witness. And object, Your Honor, that it's argumentative, it's compound.
Sustained.
Mr. Menendez, was Casey Whalen lying?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
No, it's not just Casey, it's his sister and his mother, and they're not lying.
And they all recalled that the day that you came back from New Jersey, that was the day that this computer person came, correct?
I believe that's what they said. I know they said it was a Friday.
But you didn't come back on a Friday, you came back on a Thursday, didn't you?
I'm not sure of that.
It's a good place to stop again.
All right, we'll be in recess then, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to keep you this late, but we were hopeful we could finish this, but we haven't, so we'll have to resume on Tuesday. Don't discuss this matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. Don't look at any of the news coverage. We'll see you all back, and don't look at anything else or hear anything or permit yourselves to be exposed to anything about this case outside the courtroom in any form. And we'll see you all back here Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Have a good weekend. Attorneys, people are represented. Also, counsel for Lyle Menendez is in court, although he is not present. This is a hearing prior to the resumption of testimony relating to only the Erik Menendez jury. And counsel had requested that the court review some materials this morning prior to commencing this hearing. I have done that. What is it specifically that counsel want to discuss with the court?
Your Honor, there was a question that I had posed to Erik Menendez in cross-examination regarding the attempted purchase of a piece of real estate in Marina Del Rey. The asking price at the time was $1.495 million. An offer was made by Erik Menendez at $1.1 million. When I had asked that question, the defense objected, and they wanted the opportunity to be heard regarding that issue. The second issue is a statement that Erik Menendez made on November 29th, 1989 on tape, in which he says regarding the murders, there's not much I can do, man, but I carry a gun around with me. I had asked the court for a ruling as to that piece of evidence, and the defense indicated that they would provide the court with their arguments. I have received nothing in that regard, so I want those issues to be resolved before we start, so I won't have to go up to the court and ask for a sidewalk.
And what is the defense response? Well, either.
Well, Larry Cohen business, we think, is too remote in time. This is approximate. There's no paperwork to support this transaction, because I think we informed the court last week. Mr. Cohen has nothing in writing, not even calendars and appointments. It was approximately February. Mr. Menendez was brought to him, referred to him by Steve Goldberg, and the court heard testimony from Mr. Goldberg in 402 that he was the one who was encouraging Eric to make real estate investments in anticipation of inheritance. This never resulted in any exchange of money or even attempt to exchange money. It's clear Mr. Menendez was not very concerned about this, since the real estate broker was never able to contact him again. And under 352, we think it's too remote in time.
it doesn't have much probative value given all the other evidence that's been introduced about spending. And it would result in a complete consumption of time and having to call Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Bianio and get into all the details about this non-existent transaction. With respect to the other offer of proof that Eric told Craig Signorelli carried down, I believe that was already litigated, and that evidence came in through Mr. Signorelli.
Well, then there's no need to discuss that further.
Right.
It will come in again if the questions are asked of Mr. Menendez, and he responds to it in conformity with his statement to Mr. Signorelli or whatever he says. In regards to the real estate transaction, just to put it in context, there was a hearing that was conducted prior to the completion of the prosecution's case in chief, during which matters relating to spending by each defendant were discussed. We did hold certain hearings in that regard as well. And basically, the court's analysis related to the time frame in which certain events occurred that gave them probative value and justified their admissibility. And the court exercised its discretion under Section 352 of the Evidence Code in weighing the probative value of that evidence against its potential of prejudice. And we have heard during the presentation of the people's case involving Erik Menendez, evidence relating to various financial transactions. Other offers by the prosecution were rejected by the court at that time when these matters were litigated. And the record will document which matters the court allowed the prosecution to introduce by way of extrinsic evidence and which matters the court did not. The time frame in which the transactions occurred involving Erik Menendez primarily related to events in 1989. And the jury for Erik Menendez has heard primarily those events. The analysis the court went through at that time, isolating the expenditures that were admissible, related to a time frame close to the incident at issue in this case, the August 20th killing of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez. And the reasoning is that spending close in time to that event would be reflective of the state of mind of the defendant at the time of the killings. That circumstantially activity shortly after the killing of the parents could relate back to what his state of mind was at the time he killed his parents. As one gets farther away from August the 20th, the rationale that I've just articulated becomes less probative. And one has to look at other aspects of the evidence in order to determine whether this evidence would be admissible. The offer of proof here relates to an incident in February of 1990. And as defense counsel indicates, it is not documented by any written materials. However, the defense understates the transaction to some extent, at least as reflected in the police interview of the witness, in that there was, according to the witness, a written offer made by Erik Menendez for the purchase of the property in the amount of $1.1 million. This was allegedly for the purchase of a 3,000 square foot single family dwelling in the Silver Strand area of Marina del Rey. Now, if that offer had been accepted, there would have been an obligation by Erik Menendez to follow through on a contract. Instead of being accepted, there was a counteroffer by the owners of the property, a counteroffer in the amount of $1.35 million. So a contract was not consummated by the nature of these offer and counteroffers. And ultimately, the agent lost contact with Erik Menendez and couldn't pursue the matter further, and indicates that the paperwork in its entirety has been destroyed since the arrest of the defendants, which means there is no paperwork indicating or reflecting this offer or counteroffer. The relevance of this evidence, if it's relevant at all, would relate to impeachment of the defendant's testimony during his time on the witness stand, more than a reflection of his state of mind at the time of the killing of the parents on August 20th. As I said, this is an incident that occurred in February of 1990. And just analyzing events such as these, assuming that the killing of the parents was not committed for financial gain, at some point after a person who has been involved in the killing learns or becomes aware of or is in receipt of inheritance, that person would be not entitled, but would be in a position to spend the money. Certainly, the fact that money was spent 6 months or 5 months after the transaction does not necessarily reflect the state of mind of the individual at the time the killing occurred. So as I say, this is different than the transaction that occurred on September the 15th or October the 15th, depending on which date one uses. The check written by Erik Menendez was September the 15th. The testimony was it was October the 15th, relating to the purchase of the penthouse in Marina del Rey. So at this point, we're talking about February of 1990, and the issue is whether or not this is impeachment of the defendant's testimony in some regard. So with that in mind, a long preface, I would ask the prosecution to indicate how it is that this would impeach things that have been brought out during his testimony.
As I recall his testimony, he indicated that he had rented a condominium, that he wasn't interested in buying a piece of property, that he simply loaned his brother this $29,700 when they were attempting to make this purchase in the City Club. I think the fact that he alone went out to make this purchase impeaches his the way that he's portrayed himself as not being interested in money, not being interested in buying a place. And it supports, I believe that, and Marta Cano had testified that he was interested in forming a charitable foundation, that he was uninterested in the money. I think this impeaches that. In addition, in conjunction with the statements that he makes on November 29th, 1989 about wanting to buy real estate.
All right, so you feel it impeaches his testimony as well as that of other defense witnesses that we have already heard.
Yeah.
All right, what is the defense response to the people's offer that this does tend to impeach evidence offered by the defense, which puts the defendant, Erik Menendez, in a certain light regarding his attitude towards money that goes beyond the specific spending evidence that people offered, but dealt with his general attitude towards money? And
He testified to his general attitude towards money. He didn't-
well, I didn't mean it that question was asked and his answer given, but the specific things were dealt with in
My
his
point is,
testimony.
this is not impeaching. He did not testify that he was not interested any time in buying a piece of property. He testified that he was not the proposed purchaser of the penthouse in the Marina Del Rey, period. He did not portray himself as someone with no interest whatsoever in money. In fact, he specifically said concerning the conversation with his Aunt Martha that, he was glad to find out there was going to be money, even though that wasn't his expectation, period. And he didn't go beyond that. And moreover, as the court just pointed out, assuming hypothetically the parents were not killed for money, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be interested in spending it when and if they got it. I mean, the fact is, he never took the position, I'm going to give it all away. That it was not the testimony of his Aunt Martha that he was going to give all the money away to a charitable trust. He certainly never testified to that. And therefore, the fact that he might want to purchase a home in February doesn't have any probative value, doesn't impeach anything that he said. The condominium transaction was October. He has not tried to portray himself as someone who is going to cast off all the money and live with a begging bowl on the streets of Santa Monica.
The evidence offered by Mrs. Cano would or could be interpreted just that way, that was his state of mind, and that was offered by the defense. And
He does not testify to that. It does not impeach him if she went farther than what he has been prepared to say. He hasn't even been asked about his charitable intentions on direct or on cross. We did not.
no, it was brought out in cross-examination.
Well, if it was brought out in cross-examination, then that you should not have to pay for the prosecution's question by that opening the door to something else.
No, the people are in this hearing requesting to refute some other evidence offered by the defense, and it was evidence offered by Mrs. Cano, and it was evidence offered through examination of Mrs. Cano by the defense. And whether it's done through the cross-examination of the defendant or some other means, the people are still entitled to do that. Are they not?
I don't see the point in arguing with the court. If you want to let it in, let it in. I just see that logic pleads at some point in these little debates. Mrs. Cano did not testify he was going to give all his money away. Short of that, I don't see the relevance of this evidence.
All right. Well, it goes to its weight, not to its admissibility as far as how one evaluates it. At this point, as I've indicated, it's not and would not be received for the purpose of dealing with the people's case in chief, but and the reasons for the admissibility of evidence of this nature in that regard, but only to impeach and to attack the defense evidence that's been offered and would be received in that light only. And the court is weighing this evidence under Section 352 of the Evidence Code and finds that the probative value of it outweighs any potential prejudice or undue consumption of time, and will permit this evidence to be received for the purpose of impeaching the evidence offered by the defense in this regard. Court also notes that this evidence, according to the people's offer, was not known by the prosecution until August the 26th of 1993, which was well after the people had rested their case. All right, any other matters before the jury comes out? Okay, then let's have the jury out, please. Jury is in the courtroom. Good morning to you all. And we're ready to resume with the trial and the cross-examination of the witness, Erik Menendez, in front of the blue jury only. I'll remind you that you're still under oath.
Yes, sir.
You may continue your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, directing your attention to November 29th, 1989, do you recall having a conversation with Craig Signorelli?
Yes, I do.
And in that conversation, do you recall talking about 2 screenplays that you are currently working on?
Yes.
And you discussed those screenplays?
Yes.
Were you excited about doing those screenplays, writing those screenplays?
Overall.
In a sense, yes.
And in that same conversation, do you recall talking about buying real estate?
I think we had part of the conversation was about real estate, about something to do, yes.
Do you recall indicating that you wanted to buy a house in Beverly Hills in that conversation?
No.
Do you recall talking about buying, in that conversation, buying a house for $8 million in Beverly Hills?
Yeah, we were talking about ideas that we were having back and forth. And I said one great idea would be to buy this house and develop it and this and that.
And also in that same conversation, did you speak about your uncle, Brian Anderson,
Yes,
and how you had discussed with him investing millions of dollars and getting a return of $30 to $40 million?
it's
Remember that?
actually the other way around. But I told him about how Brian, my uncle, had come to me and talked about the best way to handle the money would be to invest it in real estate and to go around buying it. And yeah.
And in that regard, do you recall accompanying your brother to the Marina City Club?
Yes.
And you testified that you had loaned your brother this $29,700 for the $990,000 penthouse.
Yes, I did.
Now, on your own, did you make an offer on a $1.495 million single-family residence in the Silver Strand of Marina Del Rey in February of 1990?
Object to the form of the question on what the house is worth has never been determined.
All right, rephrase the question, please.
Yes. Mr. Menendez, do you recall in February of 1990 being shown a residence in the Silver Strand area of Marina Del Rey?
I don't specifically remember it, but I may have.
Do you recall a real estate agent by the name of Larry Cohen?
Yes.
Did he show you some properties in Marina Del Rey?
He showed me several different properties.
Houses that you were interested in?
Yeah, I wanted to move into a house since we were going to be selling, well, the estate was going to be selling all the other houses. So I looked at a few houses in Marina Del Rey.
In that regard, do you recall making an offer of $1.1 million on a particular piece of property in the Silver Strand area of Marina Del Rey?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Menendez, also in that November 29th, 1989 conversation that you had with Craig Signorelli, do you recall telling him that you carried a firearm?
Yes.
Why was that you carried a firearm?
I didn't carry a firearm.
Did you make the statement, "There's not much I can do, man, but I carry a gun around with me"?
Yes.
Was that in response to the people that had killed your parents? You were afraid of them?
No, actually, it was in response to Craig Signorelli trying to get out of me on tape that I killed my parents, and me trying to convince him, since I figured that he was going to the police, that I didn't do it. And I went as far as telling him that I carried around a firearm for protection.
Were you lying?
Yes.
Now, you didn't know you were being taped that day, did you?
No.
Mr. Menendez, recalling the 24th of August, the day that you and your brother had bought the Rolex watches, you recall that day?
Yes.
And you used a credit card that day, correct?
I don't know.
You don't recall?
I didn't do the buying. I really wasn't concerned how he bought it.
With respect to the Rolex watch purchase and the money clips, did you see your brother take out $15,000 in cash? Currency?
If you say he bought it with a credit card, he bought it with a credit card. I just don't remember.
You had indicated that you had gone earlier in the day and had made some purchases of, I believe, ties and coats. Would that be fair to say, at Bullock's?
No. I don't remember any ties, but I know I went there because I didn't have a sports jacket and I needed to wear one to the funeral.
Mr. Menendez, do you recall making two purchases on credit cards at Bullock's?
I'm
One,
going to object to this and ask to approach improper rebuttals.
Overall.
If I did, I did. I don't remember.
I believe you had testified in direct examination that you had purchased some slacks that you had to get altered that day?
Objection to states of testimony.
Rephrase the question.
Okay. Mr. Menendez, didn't you testify that you had bought a garment and that particular day you had to have it altered?
Yeah, I bought a sports jacket. I don't remember buying any slacks, but I believe I had to have something altered. A sports jacket, I think it was. I'm not sure.
And that was at Bullock's?
I believe I had it altered at Bullock's. I mean, I just don't remember now.
Do you recall, sir, that there were two purchases at Bullock's, one for the ties and coats at $1,663.51 that was put on a credit card? Remember that?
Okay.
Do you recall that?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this. There's been no discovery of this.
Did you wish to approach?
As to the last two questions, and one of which was answered, the other question was not answered. The last question was not answered. The previous question was, and the answer, those two questions and the one answer, the court sustains the objection. Those questions and the one answer are stricken, and the jury is admonished to disregard them. All right, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, do you recall actually going to shop with your brother prior to going to the jewelry store to get the Rolex watches and the money clips?
What do you mean by shop? I went there specifically to buy a sports jacket.
Okay. Was there any other purchases that you made that day besides the sports jacket?
I don't remember any.
Were you with your brother all the time that day?
I know I went to Bullock's with him because I didn't have any suits or any sports jackets. I know that.
You had indicated that you had bought a coat. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you have to buy some slacks to go along with the coat?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I had slacks at my house. I know that I wore slacks on different occasions, but I just don't remember.
Okay. Do you recall pulling out cash at any one of those transactions to pay for the purchase that day?
Object to the form of the question, Your Honor.
Overall.
I don't think so. It was an expensive coat. I don't think I would have paid in cash.
Is it your belief that credit cards were used, sir?
Probably.
Mr. Menendez, you had indicated that you believed the BBC stood for what?
The question is vague, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question.
Okay. Do you recall being asked on direct examination about what you believe BBC stood for?
Not specifically.
Do you recall testifying that you believed Dr. Oziel must have been referring to the British Broadcasting Company?
I remember doing that on cross.
And this movie that was discussed, you believed was on the British Broadcasting Company?
I don't know what he was referring to. It's in his notes exactly. I was just giving my best guess.
Now, would another one of your guesses be the Billionaire Boys Club?
I don't know what shows Dr. Oziel watches or what he was referring to there. I can only give you the only reason I can guess is by the language of when he says on the BBC. And so I don't know.
And in fact, what he was referring to is something that you had stated to him that you had watched a movie on the BBC, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Ask the answer.
Overall.
No, that's not what he was referring to.
Now, isn't it true that you know the BBC to mean the Billionaire Boys Club?
The BBC
Yes.
are initials for Banner Boys Club.
Asked and answered before the other two jurors.
There was an area here that was reserved.
Yes.
And objection overruled.
Is that,
What was your answer?
Yeah, that is, the initials BBC are for several things. One of them is Billionaire Boys Club, definitely.
do you recall on November 29th, 1989, having a discussion with Craig Signorelli about forming a group of 4 people?
It wasn't really a discussion. I was telling him an idea I had.
Okay. And you were saying that you wanted to form a group of 4 people that you could trust, correct?
Yeah, I specifically remember doing that. I was doing that on purpose.
and that these people would be working under you and they would be making $1 to $2 million a year, correct?
At that point, I was just spinning my wheels. I didn't have any idea.
Do you recall Craig Signorelli say to you, kind of like in BBC? Do you recall that question?
Yeah, I recall that.
And do you recall your answer, kind of like in BBC, but that it's just everywhere? Do you remember making that statement?
Yeah.
Do you recall that you stated that you wanted to get something that would set you apart from the other people in this company?
No.
Do you recall talking about a Rolex watch, the one that you would have to buy in a, I believe you put it, you'd have to order it. It's blue that fades into black. Do you remember making that statement relative to this group that you were going to form? Everyone would have to get this Rolex watch.
No. If you can show me.
May I approach, Your Honor? Okay. It's page A3 of 10. Menendez, I'm going to show you the transcript. It's page A3 of 10 regarding the conversation that you had with Craig Signorelli on November 29th, 1989.
Yeah.
Did you take a look at this section?
Yeah, now I remember.
And when you were discussing this group of 4 people that would make $1 to $2 million, and you discussed having a Rolex watch, what were you talking about?
I was specifically talking about forming a group of people that you could trust, because I was trying to send Craig a message that I didn't trust him, and that I believed that he was telling people what I told him. And so I was saying, yeah, I wish it wasn't something that I was actually planning on doing. I was saying, yeah, I wish I could form this company. I want to do this. These are some people who I can trust. And he said everyone should have a handshake. Everyone should wear something that is status, just sets them apart. And I was trying to say, I don't trust you. I think you're telling the police. And this was one of the things I was doing.
Mr. Menendez, were you going to start the British Broadcasting Company?
No, that wasn't an idea I had.
So what did you mean by the BBC?
Objection, Your Honor.
That-
Say the BBC.
That's what Craig said.
And you agreed with him, it was like the BBC. What did you mean by that?
The Billionaire Boys Club.
Now, you also made the statement, sir, that and if you leave the group, I would not betray that group. What did you mean by that?
I was telling Craig that I didn't trust him and I thought he was betraying me.
And what would happen to those people that betrayed you?
Objection,
I don't know. I was just making the statement to sort of tell him, you're betraying me. But I'm not really a confrontational person like that, and I didn't know how to say it to him. So I was trying to give him the best message I could.
You were trying to threaten him?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I could never hurt Craig. I was just saying basically that I was hurt. I thought he was a friend of mine, and now I hear up in Santa Barbara that he's telling everyone what I told him. And so I'm trying to do my best now to convince him that I wasn't involved in the killing.
So you were mad at him because he was telling the truth, that you indeed were involved in the killing of your parents, correct?
No, I wasn't mad at him for telling the truth. I was mad at him for telling people something that I told him at a time when I wanted his help. And that's all.
Now, Mr. Menendez, Dr. Oziel had testified that you told him that you believed that you couldn't be connected to the crime because the guns were purchased in San Diego. You couldn't be connected to the guns. The prints in the house were your prints, et cetera. Do you remember that testimony?
Do I remember he testified to that, or is that what
Yes.
happened?
Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
And do you remember testifying in front of this jury that you believed from the first day that you would get caught? Do you remember that testimony?
What I said is that I believed from the moment after that I would get caught. There was too many things the police could find.
Do you recall again, November 29th, 1989, in your conversation with Craig Signorelli, for counsel, it's B19 of 33, that you stated, I've known from the beginning, no clues, no one heard anything. And then again at B22 of 33, in the same conversation with Craig Signorelli.
John, misquoting the statement of the witness on the transcript.
Page 19.
B 1933 on its first page.
Very well, Your Honor. Do you remember making this statement, sir? I've known from the beginning, no clues, no one heard anything. People heard things that in an unintelligible. Do you remember making that statement?
No,
Judge
could I?
read out of context about the response in the next statement.
Well, his answer is no, he doesn't remember that. And I believe you want to look at that.
Yeah.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember.
Okay, when you say you've known from the beginning, there were no clues, no one heard anything, what did you mean by that?
What I was saying is, after I tell him that I don't know who did it, and he's telling me, well, why don't you check it out? People, you should know, or don't you want to find out who did it? And I say to him, Craig said, you're not going to check it out anymore? And I said, how am I going to check it out? And he says, I don't know. And I say, that's a good question. How can I check it out? I know they're not going to find anyone. I've known from the beginning, no clues. No one heard anything. People heard things that, and then it goes on about firecrackers in the middle of August.
Okay.
I wasn't referring to me, though.
Mr. Menendez, when you said, I know they're not going to find anyone, isn't that what you told Dr. Oziel too?
No, you're misunderstanding the two conversations. One in which I'm telling Craig, the reason I'm not going to go investigate myself is because they're not going to find anyone. And with Dr. Oziel, I told him that the police don't know anything, and that the only way they could find me was through the guns in San Diego.
Mr. Menendez, do you recall telling Craig Signorelli on November 29, 1989, regarding the people that committed this crime, the shooters of your parents? You stated, man, we're talking about special hitmen, special shotguns, and knew exactly what they were doing in and out of the house. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. And Craig Signorelli responding, doesn't make sense. And you responding, we're talking serious hitmen.
Yeah.
Now, you believed that you and your brother had done this in a way that you would not get caught, correct?
No.
And that's
Just
what
the
you're
opposite.
talking about.
No, you're just pulling it out of context again. Craig and I are again having a conversation. It's the same conversation about the fact that nobody knows, and he keeps pressing me. Well, don't you want to find out who did it? Aren't you going to find out who did it? And he's apparently trying to get me to say something because he's on tape. And I'm telling him, these were hitmen. I don't know who did it. No one heard anything. I'm not going to be able to find out who did it. These are serious people. They knew what they were doing, etc. And
Now,
that's
Mr.
what was
Menendez,
happening.
this statement that you make mirrors what Dr. Oziel said. You said that you didn't think you were going to get caught, and you didn't think there was any way for you and your brother to have to stand trial in this case. Isn't that correct?
Argumentative as to yes.
No, it doesn't mirror what Dr. Oziel said in the slightest.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, no question.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
This witness not be excused.
You may step down, sir. Thank you.